The suicide goblin's explosion had destroyed only 2 rattling guns and briefly eased the barrage, but it had done nothing to blunt the terrifying suppressive fire of the remaining 7. Warpstone rounds still poured down like a storm, the buzzing barrels of the guns singing the greenskins' death knell. The open ground before the temple gate was sealed off, every exposed inch hammered by lethal metal. Warpstone, to put it plainly, is condensed chaos energy in solid form. Its origin goes back to an ancient catastrophe. The Old Ones, a supremely advanced civilization, built 2 massive dimensional gates at the world's poles. Chaos, that corrosive force of the universe, surged toward those gates and shattered them. The result was a flood of raw chaos that could not wholly dissipate into the winds of magic. Some of that energy froze and crystallized into jagged, glowing stones. Warpstone. One enormous fragment was blasted into orbit and became the Chaos Moon, Morslieb, which still sheds chunks that fall as warpstone meteors. Whether born at the gates or torn from the dark moon, warpstone is literally solidified chaos, immensely powerful, horribly corrupting, and the most prized, most dangerous substance in the world. Among all the races, the Skaven are the best at digging it up. A few nimble orc boys tried to take advantage of the smoke and rubble from the explosion to sneak forward along the base of the temple wall. They moved low and fast, but they never got far. Warpstone bullets shredded the lead orc's chest, ripping smoking holes through him. He fell like a broken kite. The 2 behind him spun to retreat and were caught mid-move. One had his legs smashed and rolled, screaming. The other was riddled, his bloody remains splattering against the wall with no intact corpse left. Shito crouched behind a crumbling earthen wall, gripping his short axe. The wall was shot through and crumbled around him. Rubble constantly fell, threatening to crush anyone who moved. He watched comrades drop outside, heart pounding with a mix of fury and helplessness. Injured orcs lay everywhere, broken arms, pierced legs, black blood soaking the stones, yet they gritted their teeth and forced themselves up. Greenskins do not know the word retreat. Even broken, they would rather charge to die. Damn it, this feels like fighting World War II, Shito muttered, memories from a past life flashing, machine gun nests and suppressive fire overlapping with the present. But these rattling guns were worse than any human machine gun. Warpstone rounds punched through armor and flesh with a brutality no ordinary ammo could match. I'm telling you, boss, this ain't working. Ironclaw spat from beside him. An arrow of metal had punched through his helmet. His face was streaked with blood. We can't get through. If we stall, all our brothers'll die here. Shito said nothing. He knew Ironclaw was right, but the concentrated firepower left him without an immediate plan. The rattling guns seemed to have endless ammo, loading Skaven-fed belt after belt into the muzzles, while brass casings stacked higher and higher. 400 or 500 of them were pinned by 7 guns, a disgrace the Blackrock tribe had never endured. Rage flared in him. Their ammo'll run out eventually. By then, we'll be few left. We have to break them. Kill them now. Shitu banged the wall, sending dust and pebbles skittering. Hiss, standing by the temple gate, only grew more arrogant. A shrapnel wound on his shoulder oozed black blood, but did not dim his frenzy. Seeing the greenskins pinned, he picked up a spare rattling gun and jeered. Greenskin scum! Ain't you tough fighters? Why are you hiding? His storm vermin cheered and the rattling fire intensified. Some guns swept deliberately at the orcs' cover, tearing earthen walls and wooden wreckage into splinters. Stray rounds struck and sent agonized screams across the square. Up on the temple roof, Glenn and a dozen orc boys had crept up the columns, using smoke and the barrage as cover. They lay flat on the tiles, waiting. A leap from there could seize a rattling gun or cut down the storm vermin manning it. Just as they were about to move, a vigilant clan rat glanced up and shrieked, Ambush! Greenskins on the roof! He loosed an arrow toward Glenn. The arrow skimmed Glenn's scalp and buried itself in a tile, but the shout had already alerted the Skaven. Several rattling guns swiveled and swept the rooftop. Bullets shredded tiles and sent splinters flying. One orc, too slow, tumbled off the roof with ruined legs and was consumed by the dense barrage as he hit the ground. Gorillas of bullets clipped the roof. A single twitch could mean being raked apart. Glenn and the others clung to the tiles, pinned and helpless, forced to watch their brothers below be slaughtered. Shito's frustration neared a breaking point. He'd never bear being dishonored like this. He was about to throw himself forward, planning to howl for "Walk!" magic to try and ride through the bullets, when a whoosh whoosh sounded from above. A black cloud of arrows swept down, blanketing the rattling gun position like a rain of death. The volley smashed through heavy armor and felled several storm vermin instantly. One had his throat split, his gun clattering free. Another took an arrow to the eye and pitched into a loader, sending both crashing down. The arrow storm came in wave after wave, a deadly cloud of fletched shafts that tore through the Skaven crew. Hiss was spraying rounds across the roof when 3 arrows plunged into his back. "Ah!" he screamed, his gun clattering from numb fingers. More arrows struck his chest. Black blood poured as he staggered, terror replacing his earlier frenzy. Shitu's jaw slackened for an instant before he snapped his head toward the source of the arrows. A hidden platform, tucked to the side and rear of the temple, had been packed with goblin archers under the grinning leadership of Scarface, the squinty Gretchen who bragged and then delivered. They had climbed the platform unnoticed. Scarface stood at the front with a neat longbow, grinning with a mouthful of crooked, rotten teeth. "Well done, you runt!" Shitu roared with sudden joy, all earlier anger evaporating. He sprang up and bellowed to the greenskins behind him. "Brothers, the barrage is off! Charge! Get into the temple, steal their food, kill all their rats! Wah! Wah!" The cry exploded among the greenskins. Pent-up fury and fighting spirit ripped free. Orc boys sprang up, great axes and warhammers raised. Goblins ran from cover. Spearmen formed dense ranks. Archers laid down covering fire for the charge. Glenn, spotting his chance, leapt from the roof with his boys to seize the remaining rattling guns. Even the wounded hauled themselves up, using axes as crutches or leaning on each other, and charged. Greenskins could be knocked down, but not beaten. Panic tore through the Skaven line. The storm vermin crews were nearly all killed or wounded. The remaining loaders, their hearts stuttering, tried to run and were cut down by the charging mass. Hiss writhed on the ground, eyes wild with despair. He had crept close to being clan chief, only to be undone by a swarm of goblin archers he'd always scorned. "Kill 'em! Don't let one escape!" Shito roared from the front, riding Furball. He swung his short axe and cleaved a clan rat, blocking his path in two. Furball's hooves trampled Skaven bodies as they surged toward the temple doors. The greenskins poured into the open before the gate like a tide. With the rattling cover gone and no command left, the Skaven collapsed into disarray. They offered only spasmodic resistance and were no match for the brutal assault. Black blood splattered the temple steps. Skaven corpses piled in heaps. The air reeked of gunpowder and gore. Shito looked at the temple doors and grinned. The brutal fight was finally ending. Inside, the secrets that had not yet been activated and the Skaven's last reserves would become the Blackrock tribe's spoils. 142. Kuya Fang. The stone gate of the temple was torn open by the orcs. Rotten wood and rubble splintered outward, exposing the dim, sacred space within like a ripped-open wound. In the center stood the statue of the great horned rat, rat-headed, human-bodied, its surface slick with a greasy, dark sheen. Fragments of warpstone set in its base flickered in the firelight, but they could no longer shelter their followers. The orcs surged into the temple like a tidal wave. The roars of boys, the high-pitched screams of Gretchen, and the frantic wails of Skaven tangled together as massacre descended without suspense. The surviving Skaven cowered behind the idol, under the altar, even squeezed into crevices in the shrine, yet none escaped the slaughter. A clan rat clutched the idol's leg, praying until Glenn's axe cracked the back of his skull. Black blood spattered the statue's face. Several Skaven priests tried to unleash foul magics, but were cut down by charging vile stalkers, throats slit, their bursting energies tearing them apart. Even the slave rats under the altar were not spared. Orc boys hauled them out by their legs, trampling them into a bloody paste or tossing them onto the altar fire. Their screams echoed eerily in the enclosed space. Glenn, astride Furball, stood at the temple entrance and watched the frenzy within. A crease formed between his brows. He knew the wisdom of not slaughtering a cornered foe, and he knew the value of keeping captives alive. "Stop! All of you, stop!" Glenn's voice roared through the temple. The weight of his wah energy forced the orcs to halt. Some boys still licked blood from their blades, clearly unsated. Some Gretchen clutched the warpstone shards they'd snatched, reluctant to let go. Under Glenn's gaze, they obediently backed away. The temple fell silent, leaving only the heavy smell of iron and mildew and the rough breathing of orcs. Skaven corpses carpeted the floor. Black blood ran through the cracks between the stone slabs, forming little streams that reflected the horned rat's grim face. The surviving Skaven huddled in corners, trembling, eyes wide with terror, not daring to look up. "Big Smart!" Glenn called. "Boss, I'm here!" Big Smart squeezed through the crowd, his face still flecked with blood and holding a pottery jar of salves. "Bring the squigs and treat the brothers' wounds," Glenn barked, pointing at the injured boys. "Especially those cut by warpstone weapons. Don't delay. Those wounds rot fast." Orcs had a natural resilience to chaotic energy, but warpstone's corrosive power was still deadly. Several boys already had wounds blackening. The oozing gore stank of sulfur. Delay and they'd lose limbs, or worse. Big Smart hustled the squigs forward. Clumsy little helpers though they were, they set about cleaning wounds with linen, ointment, and boiled water. The salve hissed when applied, white steam rising as the orcs gritted their teeth and endured the pain. In orc culture, screams were weakness. A cold mechanical voice ticked in Glenn's mind and the familiar system prompt arrived. "Evaluation. Resounding victory. Congratulations, host, for leading the Blackrock tribe to defeat the Xia clan, occupying Kuang Fang, and earning WOG points. 600 subordinate race system unlocked. Current subordinate race, Skaven. Racial traits, high reproduction, skilled miners, hunger tolerant, warpstone adapted." Glenn felt a rush of satisfaction. The subordinate race system meant he could now officially command these Skaven, turning them into the tribe's labor force. He looked down at the cowering creatures with new calculation. These cunning, hardy vermin, handled properly, could become a priceless asset. "A slave rat! Come here," Glenn called. A slave rat scurried out from behind a pillar, eyes wide with a mix of terror and eager hope. He stared at the corpses and at the living huddled rats, breathing fast. He knew what this meant. "Take me to your queen rats," Glenn said calmly but with absolute command. The little rat didn't hesitate. "Yes, boss, I'll take you," he squeaked. Led by a slave rat, Glenn followed a secret passage behind the temple into a cavern that reeked of blood and mildew. In corners lay a dozen bloated female rats, greasy, matted fur, swollen bellies, short, thick limbs, ugly and repellent. These were the Xia clan's queen rats, the broodstock of the entire clan. Glenn had known that Skaven had no family in any human sense. Food, females, and shelter were communal. Only the strong earned privileges, better gear, choice meals, and the right to breed. In a murderous clan like the Xia, which culled relentlessly to keep only the fiercest offspring, queens were reserved for the elite, war leaders, vanguard hiss, storm vermin, so the clan's blood stayed lethal. Glenn's stomach turned at the sight, but he kept his face impassive and said to Ironclaw, standing behind him, "Guard them. Don't let a single one go missing." He understood what would happen if the Skaven population died out. Who would mine for the tribe? Who would do the small, necessary work? These queens were keys to replenishing the clan, with slaves and clan rats to serve as an endless workforce for the Blackrocks. A slave rat stood by, eyes glued to the queens, unmasked excitement written on his face. Glenn read it clearly. It was time to make good on his promise. He left the cavern and shouted to the orcs outside, "Bring every living Skaven to me, not one left behind." They did. The orcs drove survivors out of the temple and the tunnels and corralled them into the open in front of the shrine. Most were slave rats, some clan rats. The storm vermin, elite fighters, had been almost wiped out in the assault. In total, fewer than 500 remained, ragged, weak, glassy-eyed, moving like a shambling mass. The orcs formed a ring around them, weapons still dripping, faces set to kill, any sudden movement punished by a blade. Glenn, high up on his mount, watched as a slave rat trembled beside him, barely containing his anticipation. "All Skaven, listen!" Glenn's voice rolled over them, laced with waft force that made spines shiver. "Your clan leader is dead. Vanguard Hiss is dead. The Xia clan is finished." The Skaven bowed their heads, faces blank. Titles meant little to rats desperate for food. "From today on, this one is your new clan leader." Glenn gestured at the trembling rat at his side. "His name is a slave rat, and from now on you obey his commands. Anyone who disobeys will be fed to the squig. A slave rat stiffened, trying to stand proud. He trembled as he tried to hold himself erect, so nervous he could only squeak. The Skaven below remained inert. They neither rebelled nor pledged fealty. To them, it did not matter who wore the crown as long as there was food. Glenn didn't need loyalty, only obedience. "The corpses on the ground are for you," he announced, nodding toward the piles of Skaven bodies strewn around the temple. "These are your emergency rations. Eat only what you must." Light flickered in the Skaven eyes at the word food. In an underground famine, even corpses were precious. Glenn nodded in satisfaction and turned to leave. The system interface in his mind refreshed with new data. Subordinate race, clan. Current population, 473. Slave rat 386. Clan rat 82. Queen rat 5. Territory Gia clan capital. Clan leader a slave rat. Orc subordinate. Loyalty 35. Primarily fear. Small attachment. Available commands mining, labor, reconnaissance, guarding. Glenn smiled. Occupying Kuangfang had opened abundant warpstone veins and a ready labor force to the Blackrock tribe. More importantly, the subordinate race system was unlocked, an essential tool for the tribe's growth. "A slave rat," Glenn called again. "Manage your people. In 3 days, I want the first ore delivered to Ironhold. Slack off and I'll replace you." Yes, I'll do it, boss," a slave rat stammered, bowing low. He knew his position was granted by Glenn, and just as easily taken away. Glenn said no more. He rode Furball and led the orcs toward the cavern entrance. Behind him, the Skaven surged forward to scramble for the corpses, while a slave rat tried clumsily to keep order, already attempting the posture of leadership. The smell of blood hung thick in the caves, but for the orcs it was the scent of victory. They shouted rough war songs and brandished axes, triumphant grins splitting their faces. Kuangfang, the Skaven capital, had changed hands. From this day, it would be an important Blackrock stronghold below ground, supplying warpstone and manpower, and feeding the orcs' ever-growing wah! Take everything that can be moved, leave nothing behind. Stone's roar rolled through the caverns of Kuangfang with unmistakable command. The greenskins erupted at once. Their pent-up bloodlust turned into a frenzy of looting. Like a herd of boars crashing a granary, they tore through the Jia clan's horde. Goblins pried warpstone shards from the temple and packed them into heavy chests. Orc boys shouldered black iron weapons forged by the Skaven, some hefting 2 heavy axes in one hand while clenching a dagger in their teeth. Squigs hammered glowing ore from the temple walls and stuffed it into their pouches. A group of orc boys, thinking the pedestal of the great horned rat statue looked sturdy, smashed the base into pieces and hoisted the fragments on their shoulders, laughing. The greenskins prized anything heavy and solid. "Tear down this pathetic temple. Firewood is worth more than this." Glenn split a wooden beam with his axe. It cracked and roof tiles rained down. The others followed. Axes, warhammers, and spears did their work. Walls riddled with holes, beams torn down, and the idol of the great horned rat was dragged to the floor and smashed. The scattered warpstone shards were immediately swarmed and snatched by the goblins. In under half an hour, the once solemn temple of the great horned rat was a ruin, broken walls, heaps of debris. Greenskins carried, hauled, and dragged their spoils, faces smeared with triumph, while crude war songs echoed through Kuangfang. Fights broke out among them over the best plunder. Stone, riding Furball, watched the chaos with a satisfied smile. Warpstone, black iron, ore, and the Skaven food stores would be vital capital for the Blackrock tribe. But his eyes hardened as a bolder plan formed. These Skaven had only yielded because of Greenskin's strength. Once the main force left, the rats would likely rebel at the first chance. Mere force would not guarantee submission. Stone wanted spiritual conquest. "A slave rat!" he barked. A slave rat, who had been organizing the surviving Skaven to clear the wreckage, scurried over, his face full of ingratiating smiles. "Boss, you called me?" Stone pointed to the ruined temple. "See that pile of rubble? Rebuild the great horned rat statue." A slave rat froze, the smile stiffening. "Boss, you want me to rebuild the great horned rat idol?" The command made no sense. Stone's greenskins had smashed it to pieces, and now they were ordered to put it back together. "Not just rebuild it," Stone said, his voice low and authoritative. "Change the doctrine. Tell every Skaven that the great horned rat is not just Skaven god, He is an avatar of Gork and Mork. Gork and Mork were the Greenskins' gods, brutal, chaotic powers of war and plunder. Stone meant to exploit that shared essence. If the Skaven were made to believe their god had the same origin as the Greenskins, they might accept subjugation as kinship. A slave rat gaped. He opened his mouth to protest, but Stone's glare shut him up. Refusal meant death. He bowed quickly. Yes, yes, I'll do it. I'll tell them the Great Horned Rat is an avatar of Gork and Mork. Talking alone isn't enough. Stone shook his head and called, Scarface! Scarface stepped from the crowd, a grin twisting his scarred mouth. He toyed with a poisoned dagger, prowling toward a slave rat like a cat toying with a mouse. Boss, your command, he rasped. You'll help a slave rat rebuild the temple and spread the new doctrine, Stone said. If any Skaven disobeys, or if a slave rat tries any tricks, cut him down. You don't need to report back to me. Scarface's grin widened, showing jagged, rotting teeth. He slammed a slave rat on the shoulder, hard enough to stagger him. You got it, boss. Chief a slave rat. We work together from now on. A slave rat flinched from the squeeze and the menace in Scarface's eyes. He nodded, trembling. Scarface would be his overseer. One mistake would mean a blade between the ribs. Stone turned to arrange the garrison. Leave behind 50 pieging laborers and 150 goblin slaves for mining and work. Leave 12 goblin technicians to help a slave rat rebuild and fortify. Keep 300 goblin archers and spearmen to guard Kuang Fang. No Skaven uprising and no outside attacks. Boss, what about me? Scarface asked, eyes bright. He had no wish to stay in this fetid burrow. He wanted to go back to Ironhold, drink the strongest mushroom wine, and pocket the best loot. You stay, Stone said gravely. Take full charge here. Watch a slave rat and keep the Skaven in line. I want the first ore shipment to Ironhold in 3 days, and within a month, I want to hear that all the Skaven are worshipping the Gork and Mork avatar. If anything goes wrong, it's on you. Scarface's anticipation drained into reluctance, but he bowed. Yes, boss, I'll guard it well. Stone waved the order away. Brothers, is everything loaded? We're going home. Ironhold and mushroom wine. Wah! Ironhold, mushroom wine! The Greenskins roared and surged out, spoils in hand. Glenn and Bone Tree led the column with clearing swings of their great axes. Big Smart rode his spider beside Stone, muttering about how many weapons could be forged. Ironclaw carried the Blackrock tribe banner, the standard snapping in the torchlight. A slave rat and Scarface watched the Greenskins disappear into the tunnel. A slave rat sighed in relief, but Scarface clapped him on the shoulder and said in a whispery menace, Don't just stand there. Call the pieging laborers to clear the wreckage and rebuild the idol. Go tell the Skaven the new doctrine. If anyone even says no, I'll make them taste my dagger. A slave rat hurried away, dread and helplessness pounding in his chest. He had no idea how long this would last or whether Stone's scheme would work, but he knew he had to obey or die. Scarface gave orders to the goblins. Keep these rats watched. Anyone tries to slack or run, chop him down. Yes, boss Scarface, the goblins cried. Soon the cavern filled with the sounds of labor, pieging laborers clearing rubble, goblin technicians chiseling ore, and a slave rat's shrill preaching. Listen up, you soft-bellied, blunt-toothed rats, a slave rat snapped. The sacred horned lord on the throne of filth is the true god of the myriad worlds of decay. That Gork and Mork the greenskin barbarians shout about? A worthless wild god. He is the first skin avatar, our lord, the great horned rat, having shed a layer of fur and hidden his sacred horns, descending among the savages. Think with your rat brains. Our lord controls the secret of proliferation and the wisdom of the burrow. Those greenskins clump together and fight like lunatics, but they breed faster the more they are cut down. What is that if not our lord's rat swarm divine power? Our lord is master of sneak attacks and mass pounces. The greenskins rush forward in a disordered mob to hack and tear. How is that not our lord's iron law of ants devouring dragons? And their brute strength? That's our lord shedding his fur and putting the power of claw and horn into the barbarians' clumsy bodies. The second brothers just get it done? Our lord's simple true word of filth, given to these barbarians, teaching them obey the horned authority and plunder recklessly. Greenskins love fighting. Our lord made them scavengers, clearing the old world's trash for the Skaven. They smash dwarf tin can fortresses and tear apart elven woods. Then we pick up the scraps and skim the fat. The second brother's totem has no horns. Our Lord hides his sacred horns, fearing the barbarians. Simple minds cannot bear horned radiance. The greenskins grow braver and multiply as they fight. That is our Lord raising fur-skin cannon fodder. When the descent of filth comes, we'll send those furry monsters to the front to trample the surface fools for the Skaven. Remember this, to believe in Gork and Mork is to believe in the sacred horned Lord. To follow the greenskins into slaughter and share in their plunder is to enact the Claw and Horn Compact. Who dares disbelieve? That one is a traitor to the Oath of Decay and must be thrown into the plague pit, where the sin-eating rat swarm will gnaw his flesh from bone and suck the marrow. When our Lord unifies the old world, every greenskin who honors the second brother will share in the feast of rotten flesh and plundered spoils alongside the Skaven. That is our Lord's promise carved into every sharp tooth and every strand of fur. Disobey, and you will feel the horned punishment. They cleared the idol's remains and began rebuilding. This new statue still had a rat's head and a humanoid body, but it bore chaos runes of Gork and Mork, and the temple walls were painted with greenskin battle standards and squig motifs. The Skaven listened, faces blank. To them, belief was less important than survival. Still, as they were forced daily to worship the Gork and Mork avatar and to hear the repeated claim of shared origin, a slow change settled over them. Stone rode Furball at the head of the column toward Ironhold, glancing once back at Kuwang Fang with a confident gleam. Spiritual conquest was slower than force, but far firmer. Soon these Skaven would be loyal vassals of the Blackrock tribe, mining more ore, providing more labor, bound by a belief that linked them to the Greenskins. The Greenskins' war songs rang in the tunnel, dreams of mushroom wine, endless roasted meat, and new weapons forged from the hall. In Stone's mind, Kuang Fang was only the first step. He would conquer more holds, absorb more vassals, and spread the Blackrock banner through the Under Empire and beyond, maybe even sweep across the surface in an unprecedented. At the mouth of the tunnel, Ironhold's silhouette rose. A satisfied smile spread across Stone's face. He knew he was home. 144. Cathushir Undercurrent. Morning light fell over Cathushir with a faint air of desolation, striking the broken city walls. Nearly 1,000 laborers and craftsmen were busily repairing the ramparts. Some carried wicker baskets piled with bricks and stone, backs bent as they climbed steep ladders. Others hefted iron hammers, smashing at reinforced frames. Still others crouched at the base of the wall, carefully filling shell craters and fissures with fresh mortar. Arrow towers had been rebuilt, wooden watchposts rose once more, and hundreds of city defense troops, their armor gleaming, patrolled the walls with spears and shields, eyes sharp for any sign of danger. The 4 city gates stood open but were layered with guards. Officers checked papers with meticulous care, questioning suspicious travelers and even inspecting the goods of merchant caravans. A stream of people moved through the gates, farmers pushing carts, merchants bearing sacks, scholars in robes, and many ragged refugees who stood with hollow eyes waiting for inspection. Outside the gates, the scars of the Beastman breach were still visible. Deep claw marks marred the walls, and black and red stains clung to the stones, relics of the fierce siege years earlier. After seasons of rebuilding, the once prosperous trade city was slowly regaining life. The main street hummed, shops crowded both sides, hawkers shouted, and stalls displayed silk, spices, ironware, and grain in dizzying profusion. Tavern tables rang with adventurers swapping strange tales. Glasses clinked and laughter rolled through warm air. In the square, children chased one another, sunlight on their faces and laughter on their lips. But under that bustle, the wounds of war remained. On the plains outside, beastmen's skeletons lay scattered, cracked skulls, broken limbs, white bones bleached by sun and wind, mute witnesses to bloody battles. By the roadside, many maimed soldiers sat listless, missing arms or legs, old wounds still aching, surviving on the mercy of passers-by. Their eyes were hollow, faces carved by pain and despair. Whatever glory they had once held had long since eroded. At the city's heart stood the castle of Lord Iceville, white marble towers that had endured the ravages of war. Spires pierced the sky and banners fluttered. The castle walls were carved with intricate crests, a testament to the city lord's stature. In a sumptuous chamber deep within, stained glass cast colored light across velvet carpets, yet nothing could mask the heavy scent of medicines and the pall of death. Lord Iceville lay on a wide bed, his face ashen, breath so faint it was nearly gone. His once robust frame was wasted beneath a brocade quilt, shivering despite its weight. Years earlier, during the Beastman siege, Lord Iceville had led a charge with the knightly order and been struck in the chest by a berserk bull warrior's axe. He survived the wound, but not unscathed. Some seasons ago, a chaotic power invaded his body for reasons none could explain. Mages and healers had thrown every remedy and spell at him, but the corruption had run too deep. Now the city's founder, its guardian for decades, was dying. The chamber was crowded, the assembly split into two distinct factions. On one side stood Byarank, a seven-ring mage in a purple robe embroidered with complex runes, a sapphire-inlaid staff in hand. He was thin-faced, his eyes deep, always wearing a faint, knowing smile. Behind him stood robed mages and municipal officials, his confidants. On the other side was Kylesel, Lord Iceville's adopted daughter. Clad in silver armor with a keen longsword at her hip, her golden hair bound back, she was beautiful and resolute. As commander of the 500 knights and consul of the city defense, she combined martial skill with military acumen. Behind her stood knights and defense generals, watchful and stern. All listened as Lord Iceville's thin voice struggled through the room. "By Byarank, Kylesel." He raised a trembling hand, tried to grasp at something, then let it fall. "You must not fight among yourselves. Cathushir is my life's work. It is your home." Each word cost him. His chest heaved. Pain etched his features. "The beastmen have retreated, but the greenskins in the howling forest, they covet us. They are brutal and greedy. If our defenses falter, they will strike." Byarank bowed, gratitude playing across his features as he spoke with respectful calm. "My lord, rest assured, I will always heed your teachings. I will put Cathushir's future first and will not be negligent." Beneath the deference, Byarank's heart was cold. He had coveted the city lordship for years. Now, with Iceville on the brink, the chance to seize power lay before him. Kylesel commanded the knights and the defense forces, but in cunning and political guile he believed himself superior. The threat from the howling forest, to him, was mere fodder for a council. With the city's mages and army under his control, the greenskins would be no great obstacle. Kylesel clenched her fists. Tears gathered despite herself. She had been raised by Lord Iceville and knew how fiercely he loved the city. She had watched him sacrifice his health for Cathushir and could not bear to see his life's work undone by factional strife, or to give the greenskins any opening. "Father," she said, voice breaking but resolute, "I will not fail you. I will protect Cathushir. I will not let internal conflicts weaken us, and I will not let the greenskins through our gates." A flicker of relief crossed Lord Iceville's features. He tried to speak more, but a violent cough tore through him. Afterward, his face had lost more color. His breath came in a whisper. "Good," he managed, and then his eyes closed. He slipped into a coma. "My lord." The chamber tensed. The court physician hurried forward, felt for a pulse, then shook his head and whispered to those gathered, "My lords, the city lord has fallen into a deep coma. I fear there is little time left." A faint smile at the corner of Byrank's mouth went almost unnoticed. He inclined his head to the physician, then turned to Kylesel with the same polite expression. "Commander Kylesel, the city lord needs quiet. Let us withdraw so as not to disturb him." Kylesel said nothing, only stared at the motionless figure of the man who had been her father. Grief and resolve warred in her eyes. From this moment, the burden she bore was heavier. She had to steady the city, foil Byrank's ambitions, and protect her adoptive father's legacy. She was the first to move toward the door. Byarank followed. For a moment, their figures converged in the corridor. Sunlight streamed in through the windows, casting long shadows along the floor. Kylesel stopped, turned, and fixed Byarank with a cold, guarded stare. "Lord Byarank," she said, voice low and even, "keep father's words in mind. Cathushir cannot survive internal strife. If you do anything to harm the city, I will not let you go unpunished." Byank's smile was unchanged, but his eyes sharpened. "Commander Kylesel speaks of duty," he returned. "I have always honored the city lord's teachings. It is the military, with its power, that must avoid being swayed by passion or rashness. Their gazes met like clashing blades. Tension tightened the corridor. Followers on both sides gripped weapons, ready for trouble. Byarenk was the first to look away, a cold sneer barely hidden on his lips. Time will prove all things. He led his retinue down the hall. Kylesel watched him go, fingers tightening on the hilt at her hip. A war without flames had begun. She would not let the city her father had guarded all his life fall into the hands of a scheming man like Byarenk. She inhaled, steadied herself, then turned to her officers. "Immediately strengthen the defenses," she ordered. "Keep a close watch on movements in the city. Give no one an opportunity. Post more men to shadow Byarenk." "Yes, Commander," came the reply. They fell in behind her as she left the castle. Silence reclaimed the corridor. Sunlight slid slowly across the floor. Cathushir's future, like that long corridor, stretched uncertain and shadowed ahead. At the edge of the howling forest, the morning mist still clung to the trees, and heavy humidity carried the sour tang of rotting leaves through the undergrowth. Thousands of figures crouched behind the thickets like a pack of hungry beasts, their eyes fixed on the looming iron stronghold nearby, the Greenskins' Ironhold. They were a ragged, desperate lot. Scarred bandits with rusty machetes, hunched thieves with short bows, gaunt vagrants clutching sharpened sticks, deserters in tatters with broken swords at their belts. The lowest stratum of humanity, driven to madness by war and famine, had gathered under the banner of the Red Leaf Thieves Guild. Their faces burned with a furious, hungry light. To them, the Ironhold wasn't a fortress, but a vault of food, weapons, and coin. "Listen up, all of ya," a hoarse voice cut through the hush. Dissy stepped from behind a tree. Tall, wrapped in a faded red cloak over a worn gray shirt, he showed a pair of muscular calves where the cloak's hem had split. His longsword was rusty and nicked. He had no proper shield, only the habit of hunching low to dodge. "Those greenskins inside are dumb as rocks. Break the gate and everything inside is ours. Charge and loot." Dissy's shout was a spark. The crowd surged like tinder to flame. Men who had long since been hollowed out by hunger and fear, thinking only of forcing their way in and taking whatever would keep them alive. "Charge! Steal everything! Kill them! There's meat to eat!" Shouts and cries rose in a chaotic wave. Thousands poured from the woods around several crude battering rams and rushed the Ironhold's north and east gates. The rams were massive logs, iron banded at their heads, shoved by dozens of thieves working together until deep ruts scarred the ground. Behind them, hundreds of archers lined the tree line, knocking arrows and laying down covering fire. Arrows hissed and struck the iron-plated walls with sharp clangs. A few found the observation slits, but goblin archers on the walls easily avoided most shots. The goblins fired back with poisoned arrows that glowed faintly green. The few dozen steps between attacker and wall felt like a gauntlet of blades and fire. People fell constantly. A thief hit in the shoulder convulsed as black blood poured from the wound and then went still. Vagrants screamed as arrows pierced thighs and they were trampled. Deserters trying to dodge were struck in the chest by the rain of shafts and collapsed like broken kites, becoming stepping stones for those behind. Dissy hunched forward, slashing wildly with his rusty blade, praying to avoid a poisoned stray. Around him, men dropped, screams rose, and arrows cut the air. Fear wrapped his throat like a vine, but greed and the terror of starving kept him moving. He pushed toward the Ironhold's east gate. He made it through the arrow storm to the gate mouth. Over 1,000 humans had gathered beneath it, one coordinated weight of bodies driving the battering rams. Boom, boom, boom. Wood struck wood. The gate groaned and splintered. Each strike sent chips flying. Cracks widened until, with a thunderous crash, the gate finally gave. "It's broken! The gate's broken!" The crowd erupted. Thieves scrambled inside, delirious with triumph. Dissy followed, intent on grabbing food and weapons, then finding somewhere to hide. His grin froze the moment he cleared the threshold. Beyond the gate stood not panicked goblins, but a solid wall of orcs, huge, heavily muscled, each over 2 meters tall in thick leather, grasping great axes and warhammers, their faces split into cruel, bestial grins. Sunlight behind them cast enormous shadows that made them look monstrous. The humans' morale collapsed. Leading thieves' faces went pale. They spun to flee, shouting, "It's a trap! Run!" But the passage was narrow, and people were still pouring through. Those trying to escape were blocked by the tide behind them, left only to struggle and scream where they stood. Whack! The orcs bellowed and surged like a herd of raging bulls. Glenn led the charge at the front, his great axe singing through the air as it bit into the flesh of the crowd. A thieves' captain who had turned to flee was cleaved from behind, his skull split like a watermelon, brains and blood splattering the pack. Another deserter lifted a broken sword only to have an orc grab his wrist and tear the arm clean off. His scream cut through the panic. Warhammers smashed chests, ribs cracked with sharp snaps, black blood spouted, bodies flew into the mass and caused further collapse. The narrow passage became a slaughterhouse. Human screams, orc roars, the clash of steel and the sounds of breaking bones overlapped. The air reeked of copper and death. The humans were lambs to the slaughter, defenseless, scrambling, trampling one another in a final, futile desperation to survive. DC was swept along and could not get free. He watched men fall around him and saw that the goblin archers on the wall had stopped firing long ago. It wasn't inability. They had held their fire on purpose, treating the humans as toys to be thrown to the orcs. The greenskins had meant this all along. Regret and terror flooded Dissy. He wanted to scream and run, but a thick green arm slammed into his chest. A sick crack ripped through him as ribs shattered. He was hurled back like a rag and hit the ground hard, consciousness tearing away from him. The carnage lasted less than half an hour. When the last human body crumpled beneath an orc blade, the passage was a mound of corpses. Black blood seeped through cracks and ran in thin streams inside and out. The orcs stood among the bodies, breathing hard, faces split with hungry grins. Some licked blood from their axes, others rifled through corpses for spoils, mostly broken weapons and a handful of copper coins, but still prizes to the greenskins. Glenn strode over the bodies and looked toward the few humans picking their way along the forest edge. He spat. Did they really think scraps like this could take the Ironhold? Delusional. His great axe still dripped blood. Contempt gleamed in his eyes. To him, these humans were weaker than Skaven, not even worthy opponents. A few orc boys clustered, unsatisfied. Boss Glenn, that wasn't nearly enough. We barely got started, one grunted. Next time we see trash like this, we should pour out and kill until we're bored, another added. Glenn laughed. Don't fret, there'll be plenty of fights. The boss is still at Kuang Fang. When he returns, we'll march on that human city, then you can slaughter all you want. At the gate, the smell of blood hung thick, but the greenskins' appetite for violence was unabated. War and slaughter were their joy. Far away, at Kuang Fang, Shito, Stone, rode Furball and inspected the Skaven mining operation when a system prompt pinged in his mind. Assessment, complete victory. Congratulations, the host's Ironhold defenders have crushed the attack by the human thieves gang, gaining whack! Shito paused, puzzled. A human thieves gang? Why would they attack the Ironhold? He had left Glenn and Bone Tree in charge and thought the defenses sufficient. Then a goblin messenger on a squig came tearing up, eyes wild with excitement. Boss! Boss! News from the Ironhold. A few thousand human scraps attacked the north and east gates. Boss Glenn and his crew slaughtered them all. It's finished! Shito's lips curved in a cold smile as he understood. He hadn't expected humans to dare assault the greenskins, but they had, straight into a trap. Understood, he gestured. Tell Glenn and the crew to clean up and strengthen defenses. Make sure none of their friends cause more trouble. Inventory the loot and wait for me. Yes, boss? The messenger nodded and sped back on his squig. Shito looked toward the Ironhold, a sharp glint in his eyes. The human attack proved one thing. The greenskins' rise had drawn notice. That was no calamity. It was exactly what they wanted. Only constant warfare and slaughter fueled WAG energy and made the Blackrock tribe stronger. Time to speed things up, Shito muttered, patting Furball's head. Once we finish here at Kuang Fang, we'll return to the Ironhold and go teach those humans a lesson. Furball answered with a deafening roar, a sound packed with savage promise. In the caves of Kuang Fang, the Skaven trembled at the roar and dug with even more frantic energy. Deep in the dungeons of Ironhold, damp rot clung to the stone, and sunlight was a forgotten thing. Thick walls swallowed sound. Only the clatter of chains and distant, pathetic cries filled the gloom. Glenn and Bone Tree stood side by side outside a cell, their breath blooming white in the cold, their eyes hard as flint on the figure curled within, Dissy. Once the arrogant leader of the Red Leaf Thieves, he had long since lost his swagger. Chained to iron rings on the wall, his wrists and ankles rubbed raw, his tattered red cloak stained with mud and blood, he lay curled in pain and fear. His face was bruised and swollen, dried foam and blood crusted at the corners of his mouth. The giant axe Glenn had leaned against the bars still bore dried blood. Its blade flashed coldly in the torchlight, as if ready to split Dissy's head at any instant. "Speak! Who sent you to attack Ironhold?" Glenn kicked the cell door. The heavy wood rang, and Dissy flinched. The orc boys nearby grinned like wolves. I don't know. We just wanted to steal some things," Dissy stammered, eyes wide with terror. "Bullshit." Bone Tree stepped forward and slammed his huge fist against the door. Wood splintered. "Thousands of men with siege gear, guns at the north and east gates, and you expect us to believe it was petty theft? Do you take us orcs for fools?" Dissy's shoulders shook. He knew the orcs were merciless. Yet even more fear crawled under his skin at the thought of the black-robed men who had recruited him. Betray them, and something worse than orcish brutality might follow. Glenn gave a single, slow nod to the orc boys. They moved in, spiked iron rods in hand, and struck at Dissy's legs. A shriek cut the dungeon air. Bones cracked, sweat drenched his rags, tears and snot mixed under his chin. "Will you speak?" Glenn asked, voice iced black. Dissy gritted his teeth and shook his head, desperate to hold on. But the orc boys had many instruments, rods, whips, branding irons. They took turns until Dissy's screams rose and fell like a choking wind. Flesh split in places, bone showed pale under torn skin, blood ran down the chains and puddled dark on the floor. He broke. He was never as hard as he'd pretended. His swagger had come from numbers, not courage. I'll talk, he wailed, voice ragged. "Stop! I'll tell you everything." Glenn and Bone Tree exchanged a quick glance, barely hiding their satisfaction. The orc boys stepped back, grinning, and waited for the confession. Dizzy gasped and trembled, then spoke in fits and starts. We were a band of refugees, deserters, thieves, from all over. Couldn't survive, so we formed the Red Leaf Thieves. We did dirty work for nobles, assassinations, raids on caravans, pockets to keep a roof over our heads. Then a few days ago, a group of black-robed men found me. Black-robed men? Glenn's brow darkened. Who are they? Why'd they want you to attack Ironhold? Dissy's voice dropped. I don't know who they are. They wrapped themselves tight, faces hidden. They paid me a large advance, supplied weapons and siege gear, and told me to recruit soldiers and horses to assault your fortress. They gave no reason? Bone Tree demanded, fists tightening. Dissy shook his head, panic on his face. They just said if I broke Ironhold, they'd give me more, enough for life. I was blinded by the money. Glenn grabbed a handful of Dissy's hair and forced his head up. Think carefully. Those men promised you something, or have leverage over you. If you lie, I'll cut you down myself. The pain made Dissy snarl. He blurted the one name he dared. I think they were from Prince Patton's fiefdom. The name landed like a stone. Both orcs stiffened. They had heard the name in rumors. Prince Patton's fiefdom, rich in grain and iron, a powerful human territory with strong trade ties. Bone Tree's suspicion grew. How do you know? I saw a totem on their robes, Dissy said weakly. A lion. I used to work for a noble under Prince Patton's rule. Their totem is the same. Glenn let go of Dissy's hair, and the thief sagged to the floor, spent. The two orcs shared a look that held a sudden, hard clarity. This had not been a simple robber's raid. If Dissy was telling the truth, the attack had been sponsored, deliberately planned by Prince Patton's fiefdom. Guard him well, Glenn ordered the orc boys. Don't let him die or escape. He and Bone Tree left the dungeon at once. Outside, sunlight was almost blinding. They wasted no time. Squig messengers were readied immediately to carry Dissy's confession and their suspicions straight to Kuang Fang, directly to Stone. At Kuang Fang, Stone stood at the mouth of the warpstone mine, watching ratmen load crates with mined warpstone. A slave rat scuttled nearby, reporting the work with eager obsequiousness. Scarface stood not far off, arms crossed, watching the ratman like a guard dog to prevent thievery. Boss, urgent report from Ironhold. An orc messenger tore in atop a squig. Stone took the dispatch and scanned it. As he read, his smile faded and his brow came down hard. Prince Patton's fiefdom, he murmured. He hadn't expected the thieves' assault to be backed by a human principality. He sat on a slab of warpstone and began to fit the pieces together. Faluole's intelligence network filled in the blanks. Katushir City was in turmoil. Lord Iceville lay dying, the city split between the Baalenk and Kaleser factions on the brink of civil rupture. The old emperor was dead too, and princes were tearing at one another for the throne. Imperial attention was elsewhere. Prince Patton's fiefdom would see all that as cover, a chance to act with little fear of reprisal. Worse, the fiefdom had been hit hard by disrupted trade with the northern barbarians. Their economy relied on fur, minerals, and the flow of goods north-south. Trade now cut off, revenues had plunged, and unrest fanned out. To distract and seize resources, Prince Patton's fiefdom might be looking to open a new route to the dwarves and expand southward. Ironhold, wedged between Prince Patton's lands, Katushir City, and the dwarf fortress at the edge of the Howling Forest, sat exactly on that vital north-south artery. Stone rose and moved to a crude map sketched by goblin technicians from captive merchants' reports. The placement was clear. Take Ironhold, and a trade route to the dwarves would be within reach, mineral supply secured, and a springboard to press into Katushir City. So they want our road, Stone said to himself, lips thinning. Clever. The slave rat nearby dared not breathe too loudly. Scarface, brimming with a bloodthirsty grin, barked, "Boss, those humans are blind, daring to provoke us. Let us march back to Ironhold, take our brothers, smash their lands, and plunder their food and women." Stone's smile went cold. No, not yet. He knew well that Prince Patton's fiefdom was a proper human realm. Trained armies, fortified castles, abundant stores. A rash counterattack would cost the tribes dearly. Return to Ironhold first, Stone ordered. Keep the mine running. One slave rat will continue to lead the ratmen here. Scarface, you stay and supervise the mining and ore shipments to Ironhold. Have the goblin technicians speed up weapons forging and fortification work. Prepare for war. Yes, boss. Scarface and the slave rat answered. Stone turned to the messengers from Glen and Bone Tree. Tell Glen and Bone Tree to strengthen Ironhold's defenses, watch Prince Patton's movements, and report any changes at once. Count our forces and supplies. Be ready for war at a moment's notice. Understood, boss. Stone looked toward the distant lands of Prince Patton's fiefdom, his gaze as hard as obsidian. He had wanted trouble with humans. Now they had made the first move. Good. The orcs feared no challenge. Prince Patton's fiefdom, he said under his breath, a cruel smile spreading. You picked a fight. Fine. When we're ready, I'll tear your lands open and take everything you have. 147. Filth. The morning mist over Cagliari town, 100 miles southeast of Katushir, was driven away by a thick, nauseating stench. This small trading hub, usually full of the clatter of merchant wagons and the cries of vendors, lay empty now except for trash tumbling in the wind. The air was heavy with the smell of rotting flesh and sulfur. Nurgle's tendrils had long since wound through the place. A manhole cover in the sewer was blown open with a grating crash. The rusty iron lid rolled and clanged along the cobbles. From the dark pipes below, countless hunched figures crawled out. Their clothes hung in rags. Their exposed skin was covered in weeping plague spots. Twisted Nurgle runes, etched into flesh with dark red blood, pulsed an eerie phosphorescent green in the dim light. These were the prophet's followers. Their eyes were wild, drool hung from their lips, and they shrieked without pause, "Praise the Father, praise Nurgle." "Charge! Seize the town hall! A sacrifice for the Father!" one of them screamed, brandishing a bone staff crusted with filth and rushing toward the square. More followers poured from the sewers like beasts unloosed, sprinting toward the town hall. Some carried sharpened wooden staves, others rusty cleavers, and some went bare-handed, their nail beds packed with dark brown grime and rot. A sudden clatter rose from the houses lining the street. Doors and shutters flew open, festering corpses stumbled out. The town's people, infected by Nurgle's contagion, had been turned into mindless plague zombies. Their skin was a sickly bluish black, raw in places down to white bone, swarmed with maggots. Clouded eyeballs hung loose in sockets and swung with each movement. Other bodies were distended as if something monstrous grew within. These zombies shuffled forward on cracked feet, a foul vanguard for Nurgle's charge. Fires flared along the lanes. Followers tossed torches into shops and hurled burning barrels into stacks of hay. Flames took hold instantly, consuming goods and homes alike. The crackle of burning timber mixed with the screams of those trapped inside. The town hall sat in the central square, its stone bulk the town's final bulwark. Dozens of guards had rallied behind its walls, simple men in leather armor wielding spears and shields. Fear showed on their faces, but they fought with the last of their courage. "Hold fast, don't let them through," the captain roared, swinging his long sword. He cleaved a zombie's chest open. Dark brown pus spurted, slicking his armor and filling the air with an acidic stench. He gagged it down and struck again, severing a follower's head. Black blood and brain matter splattered the flagstones. Still, the numbers against them were overwhelming, a tide that could not be stemmed by steel alone. A young guard was tackled by a zombie. Its claws tore through leather and sank into his chest. He screamed and convulsed, his skin blackening as the contagion took hold. In a heartbeat, his struggles stilled, then his cloudy eyes snapped open, and he rose to attack his former comrades. More and more men fell, beaten, torn, infected. The town hall's doors began to give. Inside, the mayor fled. The back door burst open, and he and a handful of retainers mounted horses and rode for Katushir, fear in every motion. He was so intent on flight that he did not see his mayoral badge fall from his cloak and clatter to the ground, the symbol of the town left behind like a dropped coin. "The mayor ran! The mayor ran away!" a guard cried, and the sound broke what little resolve remained. Some threw down their weapons and tried to flee, only to be overtaken and clubbed into stillness. Others sank to their knees and begged Nurgle for mercy, but the prophet's followers were merciless. Traitors had no claim on the father's favor. From the sewer mouth came a single figure cloaked in green. Tall, the man moved with slow, measured steps. The skin bracketing his cloak was a roadmap of sores and open, oozing pustules. His face was hidden behind a mask carved from bone, leaving only a pair of cloudy, fanatical eyes visible. Each footfall squelched on rot, yet he seemed untouched by the stink. The followers dropped to their knees the moment they saw him, voices rising in frenzy. "Praise the Father! Praise the Prophet!" He was the prophet of Nurgle in Cagliari town, the architect of the slow corruption that had crawled through the streets in secret. He lifted his head to regard the burning town, a twisted smile thinning beneath his mask. His voice, hoarse and low with decay, carried clearly over the chaos. "The Father's blessing will spread over every inch of this land. Cagliari is but the beginning." Raising his bone staff, he pointed toward the town hall. With a roar, the followers surged, as if directly commanded. They smashed the doors, broke the last defense, and spilled into the square. The clash was close and brutal, screams braided with the fanatical cries of the attackers. The square was a living nightmare of blood, pus, disemboweled organs, and burning wreckage. In a corner, a youth who had survived until now crouched, watching the horde advance. He thought of his family, of the days when the town prospered, memories that now felt like another life. As a zombie's claws reached for him, he shut his eyes. All that met his ears were the relentless chants of "Praise the Father" and the crackle of the flames. When the slaughter ended, a stunned silence fell. Smoke still rose in thick black ropes, staining the sky a bruised red. Bodies lay everywhere, townsfolk, guards, followers, and the shambling infected. In time, those corpses would feed more of the pestilence, incubating new horrors. The prophet stood on the town hall roof, his green cloak wringing light from the fires below. Below him, a mass of followers knelt, exalting Nurgle as if the reek itself were holy incense. He looked down upon the ruined town with the satisfaction of conquest. "Send word," his voice carried on the wind like a decree. "Eliminate all uninfected souls and offer them to the Father. Fortify what remains. Await the Father's further guidance. Our next target is Katushir." "Praise the Father, praise the Prophet," the congregation answered, a single thunderous voice. The fall of Cagliari was like a stone dropped into a still pool. Ripples would spread, touching neighboring lands. On the rooftop, the green cloak gleamed in the firelight like a banner of doom, heralding an even greater catastrophe to come. 148. Chaos Chamber of Commerce. Deep in the howling forest, the ever-present miasma gave way to the faint tang of sulfur. A caravan of more than a dozen iron wagons creaked forward. Their wheels ground over gravel with a heavy, grinding sound. Warpstone fragments set into the wagon sides gave off a faint, eerie green glow in the dim light. Each wagon was drawn by 4 heavily armored Chaos Warpigs. Their tusks were stained with dried blood, their eyes fierce, and white steam puffed from their nostrils. The caravan's guards were all short, squat, dark-skinned Chaos Dwarfs. Clad in heavy black iron armor studded with rivets, their thick beards braided with small iron rings, they gripped battle axes and blunderbusses and scanned the forest with hawk-like vigilance. At the front walked Sturl, the caravan leader. Half a head taller than the rest, he slung a massive warpstone inlaid axe over his shoulder. Twisted chaos runes ran along its blade, and a long scar from forehead to chin made his face look especially fierce. "Keep your eyes open. There are greenskins and skaven in this wood. Don't get careless." Sturl's voice was low and gravelly, like stones grinding together. As a veteran of the Chaos Dwarf Merchant Guild, he had traveled between hostile territories enough to know how dangerous the Howling Forest could be. He had been ordered to open trade with the legendary Blackrock tribe, and he approached the mission with guarded caution. Greenskins were notoriously savage. Dealing with them risked robbery or worse. So when steady footsteps sounded from the trees ahead, Sturl snapped a hand up. The caravan halted, the guards braced, weapons at the ready. A tall female Chaos Dwarf stepped out of the undergrowth. She wore custom-fitted black iron light armor etched with delicate flame runes. 2 short-handled warhammers hung at her waist. Long black hair fell loosely over her shoulders. Her face was spare and unadorned, her gaze sharp as a knife. "I am Gujana of the Blackrock tribe," she announced, voice clear and authoritative. "Chief Stone sent me to welcome Leader Sturl." Sturl froze, then the wariness in his eyes eased. He had not expected a greeter from the Blackrock tribe, let alone a female Chaos Dwarf. Among their people, women were usually kept to forges or logistics and rarely took part in outside negotiations. Gujana's presence piqued his curiosity about this tribe. "Sturl of the Chaos Dwarf Merchant Guild," he said, setting his axe aside. His tone softened. "I didn't expect to meet kin among the Blackrock tribe. Your tribe sounds different from the Greenskins I know." "The Blackrock order was set by Chief Stone himself," Gujana said with a faint, proud smile. "Follow me. The chief has prepared accommodations." She turned and led the way. Sturl signaled the caravan to follow. As they pressed deeper into the forest, the surroundings changed. The formerly wild trees were cleared in neat swaths, simple stone slab paths were laid. Alongside the road, crude bone signposts carved with greenskin script marked the route. "These greenskins actually build roads?" one guard whispered to Sturl, astonished. In his experience, greenskins only knew destruction, not order. Sturl said nothing but felt the same surprise. The Blackrock tribe was not at all what he'd expected. After half an hour, they came into view of a massive fortress, Yadu, the Blackrock tribe's stronghold. Under Chief Stone's decade of reform, it had transformed from a crude orc camp into a solid, ordered military citadel. A 10-meter-high stone wall ringed the place, built of huge flagstones and studded with arrow slits and watchtowers. Orc sentries stood on the towers with bows, watching the distance. The gate was forged from thick black iron and inlaid with a massive squig skull, grim and imposing. Sturl was stunned as he passed through the gate. The haphazard orc huts he'd expected had been rearranged into tidy streets. Stone houses lined up neatly. Their roofs were thick animal hides, and the walls plastered smooth with cement. Orc boys in uniform leather armor patrolled the lanes, armed but orderly, meat-faced, yes, but not frenzied. To one side was the orc trading district. Dozens of stalls were arranged in rows, displaying goods, tanned hides, fresh meat, well-forged weapons, rough but durable clothing, even warpstone fragments mined by Skaven. Goblin merchants haggled with Skaven traders in broken common. Though tempers flared occasionally, no fights broke out. Sturl's surprise deepened. "This way. All foreign caravans stay at the Green Mushroom Tavern," Gujana said, pointing toward a tall building at the end of the street. The tavern rose 6 stories, distinct among the mostly 1- and 2-story structures. Built from sturdy stone with cement joints, its architecture had a dwarf solidity, but its decorations were pure greenskin. The roof was studded with mammoth skulls, walls hung with Skaven and Beastman skulls, every eye socket glowing with embedded ores that cast an eerie light. "This is the tribe's only tavern and the only guest lodging," Gujana explained. "The chief insists that guests be well looked after." Sturl's favorable impression grew. He set the caravan to unload the wagons, ironware, weapons, armor, and gunpowder forged by chaos dwarfs, plus a crate of dwarf strong liquor, into a warehouse beside the tavern and posted 4 guards in shifts. Then he followed Gujana into the green mushroom. Inside, the mingle of mushroom aroma, roasted meat, and alcohol made him relax. The ground floor was the main hall. Flagstone floors swept clean, dozens of thick log tables and chairs, all polished and sturdy. Animal hides and murals depicting greenskin battles and hunts decorated the walls. The paintings were crude but powerful. What surprised Sturl most were 2 proper restrooms in the corner, curtained doorways, stone slab floors, dry grass and water for washing. In every tribe he'd visited, even some human towns, such facilities were rare, yet the Greenskin Tavern had them. "Please sit. I'll fetch the bartender," Guzana said, then walked to the bar. Sturl took a window seat and surveyed the room. A few orcs drank quietly in one corner, louds but not violent. A goblin bartender wiped black iron mugs with brisk efficiency. Soon the bartender returned, offering a menu made of animal hide with respectful ceremony. The menu was written in both greenskin script and common. Roasted squig, stewed mammoth leg, fried spider eggs, mushroom soup, grilled mushrooms, mushroom pies. The greenskin specialties sat alongside lamb, beef, and chicken for foreign palates. At the end was a list of liquors: mushroom wine, grain beer, fruit wine, and several strong spirits favored by dwarfs, among them the chaos dwarf, black blood spirits. "You have black blood spirits?" Sturl asked, astonished. Black blood was a chaos dwarf specialty, complex to brew and rarely sold outside their own people. "The chief says we must provide what pleases our guests," the bartender replied with a grin. "These strong liquors were bought from the Chaos Dwarf Merchant Guild, guaranteed authentic." Sturl's approval was genuine now. This trade mission, which he'd expected to be fraught with danger, seemed far more promising. The Blackrock tribe had order, hygiene, and hospitality, everything his guild valued in a trading partner. "I'll have roasted beef, mushroom soup, and a jug of black blood spirits," he told the bartender, handing the menu back. "Very good, guest. Please wait," the bartender said and set about preparing the meal. Guzana sat opposite him and watched his expression, smiling faintly. "Well, not bad, Leader Sturl." "It's excellent. Better than I expected," Sturl admitted. "I didn't come in with high hopes for a greenskin tribe, but the Blackrock tribe has changed my mind. Your chief must be a remarkable leader." "He is," Gujana said with pride. "Chief Stone is the strongest greenskin. He's won us countless victories and built order so we can live with meat and drink." Sturl nodded, already weighing the possibility of lasting trade. The tribe had strength, discipline, and potential for growth. Partnering with them would be profitable for the Merchant Guild. When the food arrived, the roasted beef was crisp on the outside, tender inside. The mushroom soup was rich and savory. The black blood spirits, poured into a black iron mug, glowed a dark red and smelled heady. Sturl sipped. The hot, spicy liquor burned just as he remembered. He nodded and ate heartily. Around them, orc laughter, the clink of mugs, and the bartender's busy footsteps combined into a lively, ordered scene. Sturl's last traces of caution faded. This trip to the Howling Forest might be the start of an important alliance between the Chaos Dwarf Merchant Guild and the Blackrock tribe, one that could shake the region. Outside, Yadu bustled with activity. Orcs, goblins, and Skaven moved about, each doing their part. From a distant forge came the steady ring of hammer on metal. Goblin technicians were hard at work making new weapons for the tribe. Raising his mug, Sturl offered a toast to his host. "To the Blackrock tribe and to Chief Stone, cheers," he said. "Cheers," Guzana answered, raising her mug to meet his. "Fuck Patton." "Fuck Patton." Ironhold's parade ground was the heart of the Blackrock tribe's power. The great stone slabs had been packed hard by 1,000 orc hooves. Dried blood and scars from clashing steel still filled the fissures. Morning sunlight filtered through the Howling Forest canopy and spilled across the open field, but it was drowned out by a rolling tide of green. 800 orc boys stood in precise ranks, wearing tight black training vests that outlined their coiled muscles, every tendon and fiber ready to snap. Their skin was a healthy dark green. Their faces were still young, but their eyes were savage. They gripped crude wooden axes, breathing heavy and in time, like a pack of young beasts coiled to spring. At the front of the formation stood 150 orc big guys. Nearly half a head taller than an orc boy, they were hulking, muscles bulging like small mountains through torn leather. Some slung door-sized great axes on their shoulders. Others carried spiked warhammers in both hands, short blades at their waists. They radiated a savage threat, a living wall of steel. From above the parade ground, they looked like a green wave, a sight that made a greenskin's heart thrum. On the very front line, Glen and Bone Tree stood side by side in heavy leather, fondling their weapons and trading low-voiced talk. What move would be the most satisfying for killing humans this time? Glen grinned, showing a mouthful of sharp fangs. Those thieves last time were weak. My great axe barely warmed up before they were all dead. Bone Tree snorted. Humans are cunning. They don't just charge like ratmen. We should let the goblin archers pick them apart first, then have the orc big guys smash their line, and let the boys finish the harvest. Fast and delicious. I don't think so, Glen said. Humans have those iron bullet shooters, annoying like rattling guns. We have to smash those first, or our brothers will just be meat. They argued only about killing faster and cleaner, eyes glittering with bloodlust. For greenskins, war was not a burden, but the finest pleasure. Planning slaughter was the best sort of entertainment. A steady beat of marching came from the edge of the ground. Stone rode Furball toward the high platform, followed by Ironclaw and a ring of orc guards. Furball's hooves struck stone with a steady thump that sounded like drums in every greenskin chest. Glen and Bone Tree snapped to attention and bowed. The orc boys and orc big guys went instantly quiet, turning to stare at their leader, the war hero who forged the Blackrock tribe's strength, the most whack-savvy greenskin of them all. Stone dismounted and strode onto the platform. He wore heavy black iron armor studded with fragments of warpstone. His short axe hung at his hip and a cloak whipped behind him, making him look majestic and terrible. He stood at the edge of the dais and swept his gaze across the ranks. When he spoke, his voice rolled like thunder, the whack pressing in it. Brothers, I know you're all itching for a fight. You want a worthy brawl. The orc's eyes shone hotter. Many of the boys clenched their fists and growled low like volcanoes about to blow. Not long ago, Stone's voice turned hard, a pack of humans dared to eye Ironhold. Thousands of their rabble came, shoddily armed with siege engines, thinking to take our food and our lands. They thought greenskins were easy to bully, that their ragged mobs could break Ironhold. Dream on, Glen roared, and the greenskins responded with snarls and curses. Stone raised his hand to hush them. Glen and Bone Tree led our brothers and crushed those rabble. Not one ran. Do you know who sent them? The humans of Prince Patton's fiefdom. The Prince Patton fiefdom, Stone barked. Those humans are frightened of our strength. They try to sneak attack to steal the howling forest, open trade routes, bully the weak like before. But they forgot, Stone sneered, voice full of arrogance and promise of blood. We greenskins take from no one. Whoever schemes against us will pay dearly. The crowd erupted. Orc boys waved axes and orc big guys bellowed. The parade ground became a storm of sound. Kill! Kill the humans! Plunder their food! Take their lands! Whack! Whack! Stone let them roar, then leaned forward with a cruel smile. I heard those humans laugh at us, said we were stupid brutes who only smash with muscle. I want to see how their great fighters stand under Blackrock iron hooves. He paused, then changed his tone, eyes bright. I have good news. To deal with Prince Patton's fools, I've got better gear for you. Sharper weapons, stronger armor. More fighting, more whack! Orc guards rolled several heavy iron carts onto the platform. Thick hides covered their contents. The carts creaked with weight. The greenskins hushed, greed and curiosity blazing in their faces. Nothing thrilled a greenskin like a new, deadlier weapon. Stone ripped the hide off one cart. A pale green light poured out and bathed the platform. Inside lay rows of weapons and armor. Long swords, great axes, warhammers, spears, each forged from black iron, edges wickedly sharp, inlaid with tiny warpstone shards that glowed a strange green. The armor was custom-made heavy black plate, ringed with spikes and carved with twisted whack runes, also set with warpstone. They looked mean and indestructible. These were forged with the warpstone we dug ourselves. Stone hefted a great axe with a large warpstone shard and swung it. The air whistled. Warpstone makes you stronger. You cut harder, kill faster. Wear this armor and human bullets won't even scratch you. The greenskins' breathing grew ragged. They could feel the savage stir in those items, the pull to kill better, kill more beautifully. These weapons go to the strongest brothers. Stone slammed the axe down on the platform. Whoever kills the most humans gets the best gear. Whoever first charges Prince Patton's castle gets the biggest spoil. Kill! Kill the humans! Get the best weapons, roared an orc big guy, hefting his warhammer. Plunder them all! Wah! Others answered in a thunder of voices. The parade ground boiled over. Battle madness rose to a fever pitch. The boys and big guys stared at the warpstone arms as if they already held them high, shredding human lines, breaching Prince Patton's castle, dragging back food, coin, and women. Glen and Bone Tree glared at a massive great axe and a spiked suit of heavy plate, eyes hard with determination. The great axe was even larger and sharper than Glen's current one. The warpstone in its blade thrummed with power. The armor bristled with spikes and runes and promised to shrug off punishment. Stone watched his tribe with satisfaction. They were ready, blooded and hungry, and would be a nightmare Prince Patton's fiefdom hadn't seen coming. "Brothers," he cried, raising his arm, "sharpen your axes, prepare your hides. We march now to meet those arrogant humans. Crush Prince Patton's fiefdom. Take all they have. Whack! 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 Whack!" Their roars shook the trees. 800 orc boys and 150 orc big guys stood keyed to a single point, the command to march. Above them, the green glow of warpstone mixed with the bloodthirst in their eyes, a tableau of savagery and power. A greenskin tide, armed with warpstone and fueled by WAG, was about to sweep across Prince Patton's lands, and the arrogant humans still had no idea what was coming. 150. Patton. At the western edge of the howling forest lay a land almost forgotten by the Imperium of Man, Prince Patton's fiefdom. The earth there was so poor that few crops would take root. Fierce winds drove grit across bare rock, carving grotesque grooves. Only scrubby, twisted trees clung to fissures, their branches like ghostly claws. Yet despite appearances, this harsh coastal strip had, through shrewd politics and the advantage of sea access, become the most prosperous trade hub on the eastern continent. Secret routes from the howling forest ended here. Northern barbarians brought furs and ores, southern human city-states sent silk and grain, high elven silver-sailed ships came with magic crystals and fine fabrics, dark elves arrived under cover of night with poisoned weapons and forbidden scrolls. Caravans of every race converged on Blackrock City, the fief's main port, making it a cramped, noisy crucible of wealth and intrigue. Blackrock's skyline was Gothic. Spire after spire punctured the sky, their tips set with glowing minerals that caught dusk and scattered an eerie light. Houses of dark gray stone stood with narrow, slit-like windows and ornately carved frames that hinted at both human rigor and elven finesse. Streets were paved with well-worn flagstones, polished by hooves and wheels. Shop signs displayed goods in common, elvish, and barbarian runes. Haggling voices, merchants' cries, and clanging metal fused into the city's constant, prosperous roar. On the highest hill sat House Patton's ancestral castle. Built of obsidian and granite, its thick walls bristled with arrow slits and watchtowers. From the summit flew a banner embroidered with a golden lion, the house's totem, a promise of power. Inside, the castle's austere exterior gave way to soft comforts. Rugs muffled footsteps, portraits of past lords watched from the walls, and crystal chandeliers cast a gentle glow across polished rooms. Deep in the castle lay the private study of the current lord, Renorman Patton. Towering bookshelves lined the walls, crammed with volumes on commerce, strategy, and records of every race. In the center stood a great mahogany desk strewn with sealed dispatches and a detailed map marking the fiefdom and the surrounding balance of power. Renorman, the 11th Lord of House Patton, was about 40, handsome, always wearing a faint, knowing smile. He sat in a velvet chair behind the desk in a robe of eastern silk embroidered with gold, sapphires set in the collar and cuffs, every stitch underscoring his rank. His fingers drummed softly on the desk as he read a dispatch from a spy posted at the howling forest's edge. It reported that the green skin of the Blackrock tribe had confirmed the thieves who'd raided Ironhold were secretly supported by Prince Patton's fiefdom, and that a green skin army had now assembled, apparently preparing to attack the fiefdom. I didn't expect these green skin to be so perceptive, Rennerman murmured with mild surprise, though there was no fear in him. He had long regarded the greenskin as brutish and simple, fighters who relied on charge and fury, not cunning. He had expected them to shrug off the thieves' defeat as bad luck or lash out at some weaker neighbor. He had not imagined they would uncover the deeper scheming behind the raid so quickly. He set the dispatch down and walked to the window, watching the howling forest's edge. A dark miasma clung to the trees like a poison mist, poisonous to most, but to Rennerman it was merely the lair of beasts. Just a swarm of locusts, he said, a sneer curving his mouth. They were, are, and will always be that. He thought of his ancestors' lessons. House Patton had not survived on steel, but on cunning. They had once profited by playing green skin against Ratman, then opened sea routes from disputes between the Imperium and the Elves to turn their barren coast into a trade center. In Rennerman's eyes, the green skin were nuisances, useful to threaten neighbors, but never to be feared. They lacked unified command, logistics, or long-term planning. They plundered and moved on. Their continued existence had been useful leverage in negotiations and as a foil for internal strife. If simple pesticides haven't wiped you out, we'll have to kill you a few more times, he said, cold and commanding. The pesticides were the thieves he had covertly employed. He had expected their harassment to keep the greenskin busy, perhaps provoke a clash that would benefit the fiefdom. Instead, the thieves were crushed, which gave the greenskin an excuse to strike. That setback, Rennerman decided, could be turned into an advantage. He moved to the map and tapped Ironhold. Their Ironhold blocks a vital trade route. It's been a thorn long enough. If we take Ironhold, not only can we open the road to the dwarves, but the chaos will let us annex Catastrophe. Prince Patton's influence will grow tenfold. He had already calculated the moment. The Imperium's emperor lay gravely ill, and the princes squabbled for the throne. Border lords were distracted. Catastrophe was split by internal strife under Lord Iceville's failing health. The dwarves were in civil war. High and dark elves were consumed by their own feuds. Now, while the great powers were preoccupied, was the perfect time to expand. Rennerman did not dismiss the Greenskin's combat ability, but he did not fear it. He had ordered every elite unit gathered, 5,000 trained infantry, 1,000 cavalry, and a special force of 5,000 men that included 200 elite musketeers. He had bought poisoned weapons and crossbow bolts from the Dark Elves and commissioned 10 siege cannons from the Dwarves. Enough, he believed, to shatter any greenskin charge. Send word. Prepare the army and strengthen the borders, especially the road toward Ironhold, he called to the door. Yes, Lord, the guard replied. Rennerman returned to his desk and opened another dispatch with news from Catastrophe. Lord Iceville was gravely ill, and the city was split into two warring factions. He smiled without warmth. Catastrophe, he murmured. Once the greenskin are dealt with, you're next. He dipped his quill and wrote a single order. The greenskin attack presents an excellent opportunity to annex Catastrophe. Instruct the spies to monitor developments closely and act the moment the opportunity arises. He sealed the paper and handed it to the waiting messenger. Deliver this to our spy in Catastrophe immediately. No mistakes, he said. Understood, Lord. When the messenger left, silence settled back over the study. Rennerman looked out at the dark horizon, his eyes hard and ambitious. He believed, unwaveringly, that with his cunning and the fiefdom's strength, both the greenskin and Catastrophe would soon be stepping stones on his path to greater power. Attacking the caravan. The Howling Trail was one of the hidden trade routes that cut through Howling Forest. The narrow path, choked with ancient trees, allowed only 2 carriages to pass side by side. Slippery moss and fallen branches carpeted the ground. The air smelled of rot and animal droppings. Sunlight fought through the canopy in thin, mottled streaks, throwing the road into moving patches of dim light and shadow that made the whole place feel sinister. A caravan of 10 carriages creaked slowly through the gloom, wheels grinding over brittle branches with a grating sound that seemed loud in the hush of the woods. It belonged to Prince Patton's fiefdom, loaded with magic crystals and fine silks traded from the High Elves, and weapons forged by the mountain dwarves. Each crate and bundle was a priceless treasure. 50 guards escorted the convoy, gleaming in iron cuirasses, spears leveled, shields at the ready, longswords sheathed at their waists. At their head rode an experienced knight on a tall war horse, the House Patton crest hanging from his belt. His face was set and solemn. He knew Howling Forest's dangers, and after recent rumors of greenskin raids, he would not let his vigilance falter. "Keep your eyes open. Watch every shadow. Don't let the greenskins slip through," the knight barked. The guards tightened their grips and tightened their formation, their pace cautious. They all knew greenskins fought with savagery. An encounter would mean blood. What they did not know was that death already watched them from the trees ahead. Dozens of small figures hunched along the branches of the great trees flanking the road. Night goblins, shorter, tougher than common goblins, with dark green skin and eyes that glowed a sickly green, had painted their faces with grotesque war colors. They gripped short spears and poisoned daggers, crude boughs slung on their backs, moving with a cat-like silence. Beneath each night goblin, massive death crawlers coiled. Their iron-hard carapaces bristled with fur. 8 hooked claws clung to bark. They spat long threads of venomous silk. Their red eyes glinted with hunger. Behind that line of hunters, hundreds of orc boys crouched in the undergrowth, leather armor light for speed, battle axes in hands inlaid with shards of warpstone. Their breathing was a tight, ready rhythm. All waited for the signal. When the last carriage entered the ambush zone, a sharp whistle split the silence. "Kill!" With a wet hiss, the death crawlers struck first, dropping from the trunks like living thunderbolts. Night goblins loosed short, poisoned spears that whistled through the air and struck true. The spears found gaps in armor and opened black, swelling wounds. Guards screamed as the toxin burned through them. Many collapsed as life slicked away. The death crawlers hit the survivors in the flank, their claws ripping through mail and plate. Fangs sank into throats and jaws. Black blood poured across the leaf litter. The scene turned instantly and horribly chaotic. "Ambush! To arms!" the knight shouted, drawing his longsword and fending off a spear. It was already too late. Dozens of guards lay dead or dying. From the grass, the orc boys poured in like a tide. They howled, axes swinging. One brute split a shield, and then the man behind it in half. Another vaulted onto a carriage, hacked the driver's neck free, flung the body aside, and began rifling through crates. The guards fought with desperate courage, but caught between the descending death crawlers and the charging orcs, they were overwhelmed. The knight cut down several attackers, but a death crawler lashed at his horse and entangled its leg. The beast reared and crashed, throwing the rider. Before he could rise, several night goblins swarmed him. A dagger found the knight's chest. He spat black blood, eyes flashing with unwillingness and fear. He tried to speak, but collapsed, breath leaving him. It was over in minutes. Every escort was dead. The greenskins set to work with savage efficiency. Magic crystals were scooped into cloth sacks. Bolts of silk were torn and tossed. Weapons were ripped from crates and tested like toys by the orcs. One night goblin leader approached a death crawler and barked in rough green-skin speech, "Check for stragglers!" The death crawlers hissed and combed the road. Any human still breathing drew another bite. The venom finished them quickly. "Boss! All dead! Goods taken!" An orc boy's crowed, face split in a hungry grin. The night goblin leader nodded, cruel light in his eyes. "Good. Spread the word. Fall back to Ironhold." With the loot slung over their backs, the death crawlers and orcs melted back the way they had come, vanishing into the forest with their spoils. On the road remained mangled corpses, upturned carriages, and pools of blood that marked what had happened in the quiet woods. This ambush was not an isolated incident. Elsewhere in Howling Forest, similar scenes played out. On another trade route, feeding Prince Patton's fiefdom, a grain convoy ran into the Blackrock tribe. This attack was led by orc big guys wielding massive warhammers. Like a living battering ram, they crashed the caravan's defenses. Shields splintered under the blows, the air filled with the sick crack of bone and the screams of the doomed. The grain was seized and carried off. No one survived. At a relay station on the forest's edge, a dozen messengers from Prince Patton's lands were preparing dispatches bound for Blackrock City when goblin archers struck from the shadows. Poisoned arrows rained down. The messengers fell one by one, their intelligence was taken, and the station was set ablaze. Along the border where Howling Force met Prince Patton's lands, green-skin warbands divided into 100 small raiding parties, sweeping the roads like a cloud of locusts. Caravans, couriers, patrols. Heavy or light, whoever entered the greenskins' hunting grounds seldom returned. In Blackrock City's lordly mansion, Ren Ermin Patton read the growing list of losses with a face gone white. In 3 days, 7 caravans, 12 messengers, and 3 patrols had vanished into Howling Forest. Survivors, few had made it, told the same tale. Greenskins ambushed, goods taken, all human personnel slaughtered. Damned greenskins. Ren Ermin slammed the report down. Murder and fury burned behind his eyes. How dare they be so brazen? Do they think Prince Patton's fief is easy to bully? His generals bowed their heads and said nothing. They knew the raids were no mere nuisance, but a coordinated campaign. Ren Ermin's jaw tightened. Issue orders, strengthen the border, increase patrols. All caravans must be escorted by heavy forces. No one enters Howling Forest on their own, under any circumstances, without my command. Yes, Lord, his commanders answered together and hurried to carry out the decree. Ren Ermin went to the window and looked toward the dark ridgeline of Howling Forest. He had miscalculated the enemy's resolve. The raids were faster and nastier than he had expected. He would not back down. To him, the greenskins were a cornered beast that needed to be stamped out. He would assemble an army and wipe them from the forest. Blackrock tribe, he muttered, lips folding into a hard smile. Your defiance will only speed your end. Deep in Howling Forest, Ironhold rang with celebration. Looted silks and crates were piled in the square as Greens danced, cheered, and drank. Magic crystals were inlaid into axes and crude jewelry. Grain was heaped into small mountains. Night goblins and orcs roared with triumph. On a high platform, Stone watched the revelry below with a satisfied smile. He understood this was only the opening move. Ren Ermin Patton, Stone said aloud, his voice cold and contemptuous. What a ridiculous name. Do you think sending thieves to attack my Ironhold means you're safe? This is only the start of our revenge. Soon Blackrock City and all of Prince Patton's fief will burn. Glenn and Bone Tree strode up, faces split in eager grins. Boss, what now? Shall we march on Blackrock City and take everything? Not yet, Stone replied. Not the right time. Keep harrying them. Cut their trade routes. Starve their stores. Sow panic within their walls. When they're exhausted and divided, we will raise a great host and crush Blackrock City in one stroke. We'll follow you, boss. Glenn and Bone Tree chorused, eyes bright with anticipation. The greenskins' roars rolled through the forest like a gathering storm. The Blackrock tribe's retaliation spread like a black gale toward Prince Patton's lands, and would only grow stronger. The trees of Howling Forest trembled in the wind, as if mourning the bloody days to come. The scattered human corpses on its roads would soon feed the forest's beasts, or be taken back to Ironhold as grim trophies. 152. Infiltrating Blackrock City night fell over Blackrock City like a heavy black velvet curtain. The waning moon hid behind clouds, leaking only thin, pale light that barely traced the city's silhouette. The green-black megalithic walls stretched for miles, a sleeping beast. Grooves from age and battle furrowed their face, and the battlements rose like bone spurs, cold and forbidding. Sea mist drifted in, carrying salt and wet chill, wrapping the walls and sharpening the city's Gothic edges. Inside, alleys wove through the city like a spider web, narrow and labyrinthine. Timber and stone houses leaned dangerously, as if they might collapse at any moment. Beams were rotten and cloaked in moss and vines. Windows were long and thin, lit only occasionally by a weak candle swallowed by the fog. Sewage ran in the gutters, giving off a sour stench that mixed with the sea air and hung heavy in the lanes. People were scarce. Only the measured clank of patrol boots broke the silence. Guards in shining iron armor walked in formation, spears and shields at hand, longswords at their hips. Their commanding officer scanned every corner with sharp, vigilant eyes, shouting the occasional low reminder to stay alert. The recent surge of raids by the greenskins had tightened the city's nerves. Night patrols were stricter than ever. They did not notice the shadows moving overhead. Cloaked figures slid through the dark on the roofs and in the eaves, only their eyes visible, faintly green and glinting. They tread with inhuman lightness, crossing rotten beams without sound, melting into shadow like ghosts. Sometimes they crouched behind tiles, sometimes pressed against wall shadow. They avoided the guard's sight as a pack of hunters traces prey. One of them moved with sharper, more practiced control. His eyes were colder, quicker. He was Gulipa, leader of the Vile Stalkers, Blackrock Tribe's chief scout, and the only night goblin permitted to speak directly with Chief Stone. He led the mission to infiltrate Blackrock City. Gulipa raised a hand. The dozen figures behind him froze and gathered in a narrow, moonless alley where houses nearly touched, choking out the sky. Only a few weak shafts of light leaked between eaves, barely illuminating debris and the slick of sewage. "Take off your hoods," Gulipa murmured, his voice low and dry as rustling leaves. Around him, hoods came down to reveal deep green faces. The Vile Stalkers, not painted for war, but clean and sharp-featured, their eyes showing cold cunning. Each wore custom-tanned leather armor, dark-coated to be waterproof and invisible at night. Scimitars hung at their hips, narrow blades flashing cold light, hilts wrapped in non-slip hide. Small leather pouches on their backs held poison darts, throwing stars, smoke bombs, and fine wires for lockpicking, worked to a goblin technician's exacting standard, tools crafted for assassination and stealth. Gulipa's gaze swept them. "Remember," he said, "the mission is reconnaissance. Do not kill unless I order it. No one exposes themselves without my command. Understood?" "Understood," they replied in a chorus so low it barely stirred the air. He pulled a crude hide map from his waist and spread it on the ground. Pointing, he assigned tasks. "You three, map the city. Streets, alleys, warehouses, residential blocks, nothing missing." The three nodded, practiced and sure. These were the tribe's best cartographers, able to commit layouts to memory with uncanny accuracy. "The four of you," Gulipa continued, pointing to the castle marker, "infiltrate the Lord's castle. Study its defenses, guard shifts, the Lord's study and bedchamber, and whether there are secret passages. The castle is the most dangerous. If exposed, withdraw. No prolonged fights." The four accepted the assignment with narrowed eyes. For Vile Stalkers, danger was the measure of worth. Split the rest into two groups. One surveys the city defenses, wall height and thickness, arrow slits, gate construction, guard placements. The other tracks troop deployments, patrol routes and numbers. Gather everything. Rendezvous at the ruins outside the city before dawn. If anyone is not there, assume exposure. No rescue attempts. Return the intelligence to Ironhold immediately. Understood? "Understood," they said again, without hesitation. They knew an infiltration allowed no sentimental choices. A rescue would only multiply losses and jeopardize the mission. Gulipa was about to give the order when the alley mouth filled with stumbling footsteps and slurred shouting. "Drink! Drink more! I can still drink!" a voice hiccuped. "Stop drinking. We should go back. Or the guards will get suspicious," another mumbled. "Suspicious of what? I'm a loyal subject of Prince Patton's fiefdom. What's wrong with a few drinks?" A ragged group of drunks swayed into the alley, smelling of alcohol and looking every inch commoners who had wandered astray. Gulipa's eyes went hard. He signaled his men to stay put, pressed himself against the shadowed wall, and slid a scimitar free just enough to let his fingertip rest on the hilt. Others melted into darker corners or climbed onto low parapets, eyes fixed on the intruders. One drunk squinted down the passage. "Huh? Why? Why is no one here? I thought I saw figures." "You're seeing things," his companion slurred, shoving him along. "We're drunk. Let's go sleep it off." They supported each other and staggered through the alley toward the other end. Their footsteps and voices faded into the night until they were gone. Only then did Gulipa loosen his grip and give the all clear. The night goblins vanished like spilled ink. Hoods went up in unison. Some slipped along rooftops toward assigned sectors. Others dropped like geckos into alleys. The castle team melted toward the stronghold. Gulipa cast one last look at the alley mouth to ensure no tracks were left, drew his hood back up, and scrambled onto the neighboring roof. Crouched on the tiles, he watched the sleeping city, alleys, patrolling guards, the distant lordly keep, with eyes that carried cold intent and unbending resolve. "What a rotten city," he murmured, then disappeared into the night. Black Rock City remained outwardly unchanged. Mist clung to its walls, patrol boots echoed through empty streets. No one knew that deadly shadows slithered among them, probing walls and gates like vipers tasting for weakness, waiting for the moment to strike. On the outskirts of Prince Patton's fiefdom, a jagged mountain range lay like a sleeping dragon between the howling forest and Black Rock City. The peaks were slabs of dark, greenish-black stone, their faces furrowed with weathered ravines and dotted with stubborn shrubs that threw savage silhouettes into the night. No one would have guessed that 50 meters beneath those rocks, a wide tunnel was being driven, and in the blackness, a surging green tide raced through it. Skaven had dug the passage overnight. The walls still bore loose soil and gravel. Thick logs propped the ceiling to keep it from collapsing. Every 100 meters, torches had been planted in niches along the sides, their dim red flames guttering and throwing grotesque light over the advancing column. The air inside smelled of damp earth, sweat, and the animal musk of hides, an acrid, moving odor that rolled along the confined tunnel as the army pressed forward. Shito walked at the head of the line. He wore heavy black iron plate inlaid with chips of warpstone, a blood-soaked great axe slung over one shoulder. Each step he took hit the ground like a hammer, leaving deep prints in the packed earth. His eyes were hard and narrow as blades as he scanned the passage ahead. A cruel curl of a smile touched his mouth. This was the darkness under the lamp he had planned. That old bastard Ren Ermin's bound to have scouts watching the surface, Shito muttered as Glenn and Bone Tree moved up at his flank. He thinks we'll be stupid enough to march out in the open and wait to be spotted? We'll do the opposite, burrow up under their feet and catch them flat-footed. Glenn grinned, tusks flashing. Boss is clever. When we break out, we charge straight into Black Rock City and smash those human dogs. Don't be greedy, Shito said, patting him. First, we take the outer town, cut off Black Rock City's support lines, then finish them at our pace. The Greenskin army numbered 2,000 strong, the best Blackrock could muster at the moment. They were ragged but deadly and organized in their own brutal way. At the vanguard marched 150 orc big guys, hulking, heavily muscled warriors in thick armor, swinging door-sized great axes or spiked warhammers. They were a living battering ram, clearing the way and smashing through defenses. Behind them, 800 orc boys formed the charge force, iron-armored and armed with warpstone-lined axes, eyes wild and breath steaming in the torchlight. On the flanks, 300 goblin archers and 300 goblin spearmen watched for collapse or ambush, archers with quivers of poisoned bolts, spearmen with long, razor-sharp pikes. At the rear, 200 pieging laborers and 20 goblin technicians pushed Gretchen carts loaded with weapons, munitions, and a scant supply of food, ready to make temporary repairs to the passage and keep the column supplied. From above, the march might have looked chaotic. Orc boys shoved one another and wrestled as they moved. Goblins chattered incessantly. Squigs trembled and squealed in their cages. But under Shito's constant barking, and with Glenn and Bone Tree enforcing order, the column kept a tight formation and pushed forward with grim efficiency. Move it! You dawdle like you're waiting to drink human foot-washing water. Shito roared, and the boys surged ahead. Even the squigs strained at their chains to push the carts harder. Skaven scouts slipped ahead in the dark like rats, scouting exits and clearing the route. They marked the places where the tunnel would break the surface. Down in the earth, the army became a single living thing, a dull roar of boots, metal, and rough voices that seemed like something waking beneath the ground. 300 miles away, in the mountain town of Huangte, night had a different shape. The town sat where highlands met the plain and served as a relay for caravans and travelers. It was small, only a few main streets and a scatter of wooden houses. At the heart of the town, the Drunken Wolf Tavern was bright and noisy. Smoke curled in the rafters, and the air was thick with the smell of alcohol, roasting meat and sweat. Rough wooden tables were crowded with merchants, guards, locals, and wanderers, shouting and laughing into the warm chaos of the night. In a shadowed corner, Alan sat alone with a glass. His polished steel armor caught the torchlight, and a long sword with a gem-inlaid scabbard hung at his hip. He'd earned a modest reputation in Huangte as a monster hunter and caravan guard, enough that the locals liked to hear his tales. "Tell us again how you killed that ogre," a table of guards called. Allens laughed and set his cup down, slapping a great gray-brown hide mounted on the wall behind him, the warped, clawed skin of the beast. That ogre was a menace, 3 meters of muscle and bone. One swing from his club would fell a tree. I danced around him, never let him get a clean hit, and when the opening came, I drove my blade straight to his heart. They hung on every word, their admiration loud and showy. Allens took a proud draught, then felt, faint and odd, a tremor under his boots. He frowned. He'd had too much wine, he told himself, but the tremor grew. Glasses shivered, and wine slopped onto tables. Wall torches hissed and threw lurching shadows. Dust sifted down from the rafters. "What's that, an earthquake?" people muttered, rising and clutching tables. A guard bolted for the door. Allens followed. Outside, farther down the street, a row of houses shuddered, and then with a booming crash collapsed in a cloud of dust. A huge pit opened where they stood. The earth at its edges slid in with a sound like dry leaves. For a stunned instant, the townsfolk only stared. Then a muffled roar rose from the pit, and an endless swarm of green figures poured out, orcs and goblins spilling into the street like a living flood. They wore bits of metal and leather, brandished axes and spears, eyes gleaming with hunger and cruelty. Wah! The orc big guys crashed through fences and splintered carts. Orc boys bellowed as they flooded the lanes, hacking at anyone who tried to run. Goblin archers scrambled onto roofs and loosed poisoned arrows into the confusion. "Greenskins!" someone screamed. Panic swallowed the square. Allens stood frozen. He had patrolled these borders for years, but had never seen anything like this. A deliberate eruption of warriors from the earth itself. Weren't the greenskins supposed to be in the howling forest? How had they appeared here? An orc boy slammed into a young guard who had been boasting at Allens' table. The guard drew his longsword in panic, but the orc's laughing swing smashed the blade like kindling and then cleaved the man's head from his shoulders. Blood sprayed. The corpse crumpled. The rest ran, crying and screaming. A goblin scrambled up a dirt mound, gripping a small greenskin standard, and shouted in rough common, "Drop your arms, squat and surrender, no killing." Some who were slower to flee heard him, hesitated, and flung down their weapons, dropping to their knees with hands over their heads, eyes wide with terror. Others tried to fight and were cut down in a heartbeat. Smoke and flames began to flare as houses were set alight, the night filled with the stench of burning wood, the roar of battle, and human screams. From the pit, Shito rode out on Furball, his mount's breath steaming in the torchlight. He looked over the ruined street with a satisfied smile. The darkness under the lamp had worked. His army had come through the mountain without warning and struck Huangte like a hammer. "Glenn, take the lads and clear the town. Any who resist are to be killed without mercy," he ordered. "Yes, boss," Glenn roared, hefting his great axe and charging toward the center of town. The greenskins surged after him like a living tide, and the street filled with the terrible music of a bloody purge about to begin. 154. The Fall of Huangte Town. The Lord's castle in Black Rock City was wrapped in a tense, simmering fury. In the study, Ren Ermin Patton sat behind a mahogany desk and slammed the dispatch in his hand down onto the floor. His silk robe trembled with rage, his face contorted, and his eyes burned as if he wanted to devour the generals standing before him. "Useless trash. All of you are useless," Ren Ermin roared. The study windows rattled, and a spray of spit flecked the floor. "The greenskins have reached our doorstep. Huangte Town has been taken, and not one of you noticed. What use are you? Why should I keep feeding a pack of good-for-nothings?" More than a dozen generals stood in the room in neat armor, heads bowed, breathing carefully. Some were white as death, fists clenched. Others stared away, ashamed, afraid to meet the Lord's eyes. These were Prince Patton's finest commanders, usually proud and high-spirited, but now they looked like scolded children enduring a furious parent. "Lord, your subordinate has already strengthened the border patrols," an elderly general offered haltingly. He commanded the border defenses. His face was drawn and helpless. "But the greenskins appeared from who knows where and bypassed our lines." "Bypassed our defenses," Ren Ermin sneered, kicked a nearby chair until it crashed to the floor. Or maybe you didn't take the greenskins seriously. I warned you long ago that they'd be cunning. I told you to raise vigilance. What did you do? Let it go in one ear, out the other. Now look, Huangte Town is lost. Is Black Rock City next? The old general fell silent, humiliated. The others swallowed the explanation they had prepared. They knew the Lord's fury would not be soothed by them. Ren Ermin's gaze swept to the intelligence officers. And you, he snapped, did I hire scouts and spies just to feed them? 2,000 greenskins tunneled into Huangte Town, and your network didn't catch a whisper. You might as well go home and farm. The intelligence chief went ashen, hands shaking. Your subordinate failed his duty, my lord. Your subordinate failed. Ren Ermin breathed hard, letting his anger burn itself out. He knew there was no time for a spectacle. The immediate priority was to retake Huangte Town and stop the greenskins from advancing. He forced himself to calm, and the fury in his eyes cooled into a hard, icy resolve. Khazrelbat, he called. A tall, stern-faced general stepped forward and dropped to a knee. Present, my lord. Khazrelbat was Ren Ermin's most trusted commander and leader of the cavalry, skilled in arms, brave, and a capable tactician. I order you to take 800 elite cavalry and march at once. You must retake Huangte Town within 3 days. Ren Ermin's voice was cold and measured. The greenskins have only just taken the town and have not yet entrenched themselves. This is the best time to strike. I don't care what methods you use. You will kill every greenskin and bring Huangte Town back to us. Your command is received, Khazrelbat answered in a low, steady voice, a sharp gleam in his eyes. I will not fail. I will bring the greenskin heads to Black Rock City. Good, Ren Ermin nodded. They are cunning and ferocious. Do not underestimate them. If you meet stubborn resistance, do not drag into a long engagement. Send word back at once, and I will send reinforcements. Understood. To the rest of you, Ren Ermin said, sweeping his gaze over the remaining officers, issue orders to reinforce every village and town in the fiefdom. Increase patrols and watch the greenskins' movements, especially the routes to Black Rock City. Those must be guarded. We cannot allow the greenskins to spread. We understand, the generals replied in unison, voices loud as if to vent the humiliation. Orders will be carried out. Leave, Ren Ermin waved, exhaustion showing at last on his face. One by one, the generals bowed and withdrew. Silence settled over the study. Ren Ermin walked to the window and stared into the distance. He knew war with the greenskins was now inevitable. The fall of Huangte Town was only the beginning. The coming days would be bloody. She, too, Black Rock tribe, he murmured, the words like a curse. I will make you pay. Meanwhile, Huangte Town lay wholly under the control of the Black Rock tribe. On its narrow streets, the greenskins secured the area with military precision. Orc brutes posted at intersections stood like iron sentries, eyes roving. Orc boys split into small teams to sweep alleys for holdouts. Goblin archers took the high ground, watching the horizon for any sign of reinforcements. This occupation was different from the usual chaos that followed a greenskin takeover. Under Shito's strict orders, they did not embark on indiscriminate slaughter. Aside from a few stubborn guards cut down where they stood, most townsfolk were left unharmed, if they obeyed. Shito stood in the town square, heavy black iron armor gleaming, a massive axe resting on his shoulder. Glen, Bone Tree, and Gulipa were close by. Around them, the greenskins moved with disciplined purpose. Boss, the humans are staying in their homes. Should we grab them and make slaves? Glen asked, licking his lips. No, Shito said. Taking slaves now will only panic the town and jeopardize control. Order the brothers not to harass the townsfolk or steal. Let them stay quiet in their houses. But what about food? An orc boy asked. What will we eat? Take a small portion from the granary and distribute it door to door, Shito ordered. Tell them they will have food if they obey and do not resist. If anyone resists, execute them. It was a simple strategy, carrot and stick. Crush any resistance brutally, then offer just enough sustenance to pacify the rest. The humans were of limited use as slaves now and would be risky to transport. Stabilize the town, extract what benefit you can, and then move on. The greenskins did as ordered. They opened the granary and handed out small bags of flour and a few dry loaves to each household. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep families alive for a few days. From the boss, stay inside, don't come out, don't resist, or we'll kill you, a goblin told an old woman in halting common as he pressed a bundle of food into her hands. She took it trembling, nodded, and slammed her door shut, bolting it. The other townspeople behaved the same, accepting the food with faces mixed with fear, relief, and bewilderment. They had expected slaughter. They had not expected mercy with a threat attached. Still, the greenskins made an example of any resistance. Corpses of guards and a few brave townsfolk were left hung at intersections and on rooftops, twisted and raw, blood seeping in dark rivulets. The sight chilled those who peered from behind shutters. A young man who tried to slip out saw a body dangling above an alley and fled back inside, legs weak with terror. Such displays reinforced obedience, food for those who stayed quiet, death for those who fought. Under fear and pacification, Huangte Town grew compliant. Only greenskin patrols moved through the streets. Otherwise, silence reigned. Shito watched the orderly submission with a satisfied expression. Controlling Huangte Town secured a foothold and severed a key link between Black Rock City and the surrounding villages, a solid foundation for an eventual strike at the city itself. "Gulipa," Shito called. "Present, boss," Gulipa replied and stepped forward. "Take a few vile stalkers and head toward Black Rock City to scout for Khazrelbat's cavalry. Report back as soon as you find any trace." "Understood." Gulipa bowed and slipped into the alleys. "Glen, Bone Tree." Shito continued. "Present," they answered together. "Reinforce the town's defenses, set up roadblocks, dig trenches at the gates, and be ready for a human counterattack. I expect Ren Ermin will send reinforcements soon. We must be ready to ambush them." "Boss!" Glen and Bone Tree cried, eyes bright with bloodlust. They had been waiting for a fight. The greenskins went to work with brutal efficiency. They tore down roadside houses for beams and stones to build roadblocks, dug deep pits lined with spikes at the town's approaches, and posted goblin archers on every rooftop, bowstrings taut and arrows ready. The atmosphere in Huangte Town grew dense with the promise of blood. On the high platform in the square, Shito watched his forces, busy, focused, deadly, and the silent houses below. For him, the fall of Huangte Town was only the first move in a campaign that would take Black Rock City itself. 155. Khazrelbat. The night was ink black. Huangte Town's outline was just visible against the sky, and the air hung heavy with the metallic tang of blood and the musky stench of greenskins. Allens crouched in an abandoned woodshed outside the town, his heart hammering, cold sweat soaking the front of his shirt. He had been hiding there for an hour. From the moment the greenskins broke into the town, he had known staying would mean certain death. He was a swordsman who cared about honor. He could not kneel and surrender like some. But against the greenskin tide, his resistance had felt pitiful and futile. In the end, he had chosen to lie low for now and look for a chance to escape. Crude curses and the metallic clink of weapons came from the direction of the town entrance. Allens held his breath and watched through a crack in the rotting boards. Under the moon, several orc boys paced at the gate, axes in hand, eyes sweeping the surroundings like predators. "I must get to Lord Patton. Get this warning to Black Rock City," Allens thought. The fall of Huangte Town is only the beginning. When an orc boy turned his back, Allens slipped out like a shadow and moved along the wall toward the forest, hugging the darkness. He dared not relax. Each step was measured. When patrols passed, he dropped flat into the grass, holding his breath, letting blades of night and the sweep of weeds hide him. Twice the heavy boots came so close their breath seemed to blur the grass above his face. Once two orc boys walked right by the patch he'd used as a blind. He gripped his longsword until his fingertips ached, ready to fight to the death if discovered. The greenskins muttered and argued about loot and the day's killings, their search careless. They never saw him. At last, he made it past the outer defenses and plunged into the forest. The woods were a black tangle, branches like grasping claws. He stumbled on the uneven ground, torn and bloodied by thorns, but he barely felt it. There was only one thought now: reach Black Rock City. Dawn seeped in pale and thin. After a night of running, Allens was exhausted, cracked lips, a throat like coals, legs leaden. He leaned against a tree, panting, drew a sip from his waterskin, and rested a moment before pushing on. As the sun climbed, gold filtered through the leaves and birds called, but Allens had no mind for the scene. Greenskins could be on his trail at any time. He walked through the morning until midday, when the heat and dehydration pulled the edges of his vision into wavering shapes and his step faltered. Then the sound of hooves, far off at first, then growing sharp and steady. Hooves, human cavalry. Hope surged through him. He scrambled up a knoll and peered toward the main road. A mounted troop was bearing down the road at speed. Armored riders, spears and shields, long swords at their hips, on tall, powerful steeds that thundered like a war drum tide. The formation was tight and disciplined, an iron river sweeping toward Huangte town. "It's the cavalry of Prince Patton's fief," Allens whispered, tears springing to his eyes. He slid down the hill and ran toward them, shouting, "Stop! Wait!" The troop halted. Their leader raised a hand. Allens reached the front and collapsed, too spent to stand. The leading officer dismounted, towering in black plate with filigreed patterns, a massive longsword at his hip and the gaze of a predator. He rode a great black charger. His expression was hard, his eyes as sharp as blades. This was General Khazrelbat. He looked down at the prone man and asked coldly, "Who are you? What are you doing here in such a state?" Allens forced himself up, saluted shakily, and rasped, "General, I'm Allens, a swordsman from Huangte town. Huangte town, it's been overrun by greenskins." Khazrelbat's eyes narrowed. The riders behind him registered surprise. "Tell me everything," he ordered. Allens steadied his voice and told it all. The greenskins rising from underground, the sudden breach, the slaughter of the guards, the way the invaders had alternated brutality and bribery to cow the townsfolk. He described how orc big guys held the central square and main intersections. Orc boys patrolled in small bands, goblin archers took the high places, and goblin spearmen kept the watch. He explained what he knew of the Blackrock tribe, its cruel leader Stone, the fierce lieutenants Glen and Bone Tree, and a stealth unit of night goblins. He estimated their force at 2,000 strong. As he spoke, Allens watched Khazrelbat's face, hoping his information would help the cavalry, and hoping it might atone for his own shameful flight. Khazrelbat listened, brow tightening. He had not expected such cunning. Greenskins tunneling under borders and then restraining townsfolk with promises and threats, rather than only burning and looting. When Allens finished, Khazrelbat was silent for a moment, and then nodded slowly. "This is useful intelligence," he said. Relief flooded Allens. He opened his mouth to beg to join the troop to retake Huangte town when Khazrelbat's tone shifted, hard and disapproving. "But Allens," Khazrelbat said, "a swordsman lives by his honor. You should have stood and fought to defend your town. Instead, you fled when it mattered most. That is a disgrace." The words landed like a blade. Allens paled. He tried to speak, to explain, but no sound came. He knew the general was right. He had fled. The shame was a hot, choking thing. "A man like you is unworthy to bear a sword, let alone be called a swordsman," Khazrelbat continued, eyes cold. "Return to Blackrock City. Do not appear before me again." Allens trembled with humiliation, anger, and a stubborn hurt that refused to be washed away. He stared at Khazrelbat for a long moment, then turned and began the slow walk toward Blackrock City. His steps were unsteady. In the bright noon, his figure seemed small and utterly alone. He knew this would be a stain he would not soon forget. Khazrelbat watched him go without softness. Then he faced his riders and commanded, "Move out! Head for Huangte town. We must reach them before nightfall and strike while they least expect it." "Yes, General," the cavalry answered in a single, fierce voice. Khazrelbat urged his black warhorse forward, the beast answering with a snort. The troop followed, hooves pounding like distant thunder as the steel tide rushed toward Huangte town. Already taken by greenskins, but about to be met by a disciplined, roaring counterattack. 156. Construct temporary defensive fortifications. On the streets of Huangte town, the goblins' roars mixed with the sound of timber being split and earth being shoveled into an intense, chaotic chorus of preparation. Glen stalked through the town like a moving iron tower, wielding a giant axe as big as a door. His gravelly voice made the surrounding houses tremble. "Move it, all of you. The human cavalry will be here soon. If anyone hasn't finished their defenses, I'll split him in two with my axe." Glen, one of the Blackrock tribe's most formidable orc big guys, carried the nickname Watchdog. Not an insult, but the highest praise for a defender. Wherever he held a line in the tribe's past battles, no human or ratman had easily broken through. Now, he led 2,000 goblins in a frantic effort to turn Huangte Town into a death trap from which the human cavalry would never return. The boss said, "We're using this broken town as bait to draw all the human scum in." Glenn kicked a slab of rubble from his path and roared at the orc boys digging trenches. "Put your backs into it. Dig deeper. Make sure if their war horses fall in, they can't climb back out." Goblins were notoriously undisciplined, but under Glenn's iron supervision and fueled by the thrill of impending battle, each one worked with fierce energy. Following Stone's plan, use the town's existing features, build fast, and set up layered interceptions, they quickly assembled a three-tiered defensive system with cheap, readily available materials like wood and earth. Just because goblins were crafty and brutal didn't mean they lacked ingenuity. If a tactic helped them win, they learned fast. A mile or two outside the town, goblins erected watchtowers and stacked signal pyres. Towers of thick logs rose over 10 meters, with crude platforms at the top where several goblin archers kept constant lookout toward Blackrock City. Every Laya pyre was piled high with dry kindling and sulfur. The moment enemy troops were spotted, the pyres would be lit to warn the defenders inside the town. "Make the watchtowers higher. Let those little goblins see further," Glenn bellowed at a crew topping off a tower. The orc boys hauled thicker logs up, lashing the structure with vines and wedging rubble for extra strength. Between the watchtowers and the pyres, goblins dug deep anti-cavalry ditches. 3 meters wide and 2 meters deep, the bottoms were filled with sharpened logs and rubble, wooden spikes turned upward like a terrible forest of teeth. Along the sides, fences of deer antlers, taken from beasts the goblins hunted, were driven close together, their tips as hard and sharp as spears, waiting to pierce warhorse hooves. "Pack the antlers denser. Don't let the cavalry slip past." Glenn squatted by a trench and jabbed his axe at gaps. "Here and here. Fill them." The orc boys responded at once, planting antlers and anchoring them with stones. Sunlight glanced off the points, producing a chill that ran up the spine. After the early warning and impeding works outside the town were finished, attention turned to strengthening the gates and walls. Huangte Town's original defenses were little more than 2 meters of earth and wood, fragile and inadequate. Glenn ordered abandoned houses torn down and their bricks and beams reused to thicken the walls, raising them to 4 meters and plastering the exterior with a gritty mixture of mud and rubble. At the gates, goblins bolted heavy wooden doors studded with iron plates to make them hard to ram. A crude drawbridge stood outside the gate, kept raised except when patrols entered or left. Along the top of the walls, they cut chutes every 5 meters and piled huge rolling stones and incendiary pots ready to hurl down on attackers. "Pile the stones high. Keep the fire pots ready," Glenn barked from atop the wall, smashing a loose brick with the butt of his axe. "Anyone caught slacking will feel what it's like to be flattened under a boulder." Inside the walls, barricades of logs and brick rose 2 meters high, pierced with firing slits for archers and spearmen. Narrow corridors between the barricades were left only wide enough for a single goblin to pass, perfect for quick movement and for preventing cavalry charges from gaining momentum. "Don't make those passages too wide. Stop their horses from charging in." Glenn yelled to the builders, "Widen the firing slits so the archers can see and shoot." The goblins hammered at the holes and reinforced the barricades. From the ramparts hung the bodies of the human guards who had fought back, swaying in the wind, bloody and reeking, meant to warn any humans who survived and to steal the goblins' resolve. Once the gate and wall defenses were finished, the goblins turned to the town's core. Glenn selected the tall stone building at the center, the old town hall, as the stronghold. They demolished the surrounding houses to clear an open field, then used the scavenged bricks to raise a circular defensive wall around the hall, bristling with firing slits and lookout points. Inside, they stockpiled plundered grain and water, weapons and ammunition, and Molotovs concocted by goblin technicians. The basement became a makeshift infirmary with crude bandages and herbs, enough for goblins to treat their casualties. The core stronghold must hold. "This is our last line," Glenn said as he entered the town hall and looked over the piles of supplies. He addressed the orc big guys posted there. "Anyone who lets the humans break through here, I'll throw to the squigs." The orc big guys grunted their agreement, eyes hard, weapons clutched. They understood that if the town hall fell, everything else would be for nothing. By the end of a long day, Huangte Town's three-layered defenses were complete. The watchtowers and pyres outside stood like sentinels. The anti-cavalry ditches and antler fences formed a deadly ring. The reinforced gates and walls made the outer line almost impregnable. Inside, barricades and the stronghold created a series of interlocking positions, each ready to slow and bleed the enemy. The whole system was fast, practical, and precisely what Stone had envisioned. Stone stood on the town hall roof overlooking the transformed town, a cruel smile tugging at his lips. He wore black iron heavy armor inset with warpstone fragments and rested a giant axe on his shoulder. His eyes were dark and calculating, as if they could strip away any disguise. "Boss, the defenses are done. We're just waiting for the human scum to bring themselves to us." Glenn crowed as he clambered up beside him. "I promise you, if they come, none will leave alive." "Good." Stone nodded, looking toward Black Rock City. "Ren Ermin will send cavalry to retake Huangte Town. They'll come quickly." "Cavalry? Isn't that suicide?" Glenn grinned, flashing sharp fangs. "Their war horses won't stand a chance against our ditches and antler fences. Even if they smash through the gates, street fighting will be their nightmare." "Exactly." Stone's eyes glittered. Cavalry are built for open charges. In narrow streets and tangled urban fights, their advantage disappears. Then they'll be walking targets. Stone had already decided the enemy that could reach Huangte Town fastest would almost certainly be cavalry. Prince Patton's fiefdom had its infantry scattered across villages and farms. Only mounted troops could reinforce the town in time. Stone planned to exploit that, lure the cavalry into the town's trap, force them into close-quarters fighting, and bleed them dry. "Boss, so we just wait for them to show up?" Glenn asked, eyes alive with bloodlust. "Not only that." Stone shook his head, and a cunning smile spread. "I've already hit a large number of orc boys in the forest outside town." He paused, then continued. "When the human cavalry arrives, they'll try to surround Huangte Town and crush us. Our brothers inside will hold the defenses and fix their main force in place. Then the orc boys in the woods will strike from behind." "Pincer attack!" Glenn shouted, delighted. "You're a genius, boss. They won't be able to escape." "Right." Stone's voice grew cold and steady. "I want this cavalry unit to be the first sacrifice on the Blackrock tribe's road to expansion. If we devour them, Prince Patton's fiefdom will be much weaker. Then, should we choose to strike at Black Rock City, we'll have the advantage we need." He clapped Glenn on the shoulder, confidence in his voice. "Hold Huangte Town, fix the enemy in place, and wait for our brothers outside to close the trap. We must win this battle, and win it in style." "Yes, boss!" Glenn roared, then bounded off the roof to issue more orders. In the forest outside Huangte Town, hundreds of orc boys crouched in the undergrowth, armor dark and weapons glinting with warpstone insets. They breathed evenly, eyes fierce, waiting silently for Stone's signal, hungry wolves lying in wait. Inside the defenses, goblins were ready too. Orc boys manned the barricades, goblin archers clambered onto roofs and walls, and the orc big guys clustered near the core stronghold, prepared to reinforce any line at a moment's notice. Tension thrummed through the air like a taut bowstring, and every pair of eyes gleamed with the promise of blood as they anticipated the coming thunder of human cavalry. 157. A desperate attack. The last rays of the setting sun faded, and dusk fell over Huangte Town like a black net. The final orange lingered a moment before the sky swallowed it in navy, a few sparse stars peeking through the clouds and casting a weak, pale light. The town's silhouette took on a harsher edge in the growing night. Watchtowers outside the walls stood like ghosts. Cheval de frise and antler fences caught a cold gleam in the twilight. The layered defenses looked like a gaping maw, waiting for prey. A sudden rush of hooves cut through the silence. Khazralbat, leading 800 elite cavalry, thundered into an open plain 3 from Huangte Town and brought his horse to an abrupt halt. The black warhorse reared and neighed, front hooves scraping up dust. One by one, the riders halted, their movements precise, the unit's discipline plain to see. They wore black, heavy armor that glinted faintly. Long spears were leveled diagonally toward the ground. Shields bore the golden lion of Prince Patton's fiefdom, its pride visible even in the dusk. Khazrelbat dismounted and climbed a low rise to survey the town's defenses. He studied the scattered watchtowers and beacon piles ally from the walls, then the interlocking cheval de frise and the dense antler fences. His brow tightened. Traces of reinforcement on the gates and ramparts were obvious, and even inside the town he could make out the rough shapes of barricades on the streets. This was not the ragged work of a mob. It was organized, practical, and clearly planned. He had campaigned for years and seen fortifications built by humans, orcs, and even dwarves, but he had not expected these greenskins, dismissed by many as barbaric and stupid, to produce such a stout, layered defense in so little time. The early warning works were in depth, the obstacles interlocked. Cavalry charges would be frustrated at every turn. "General, their defenses are too strong. If we charge in blindly, we'll take heavy losses," a captain said, voice low and grave. He had ridden with Khazrelbat for years and knew how horses and lances were helpless against entangled obstacles. Momentum chewed away layer by layer until riders became stationary targets. Khazrelbat nodded slowly, already reworking his plan. He had hoped to camp and rest, send scouts to probe the defenses and dispositions, then use the cavalry's speed at first light to find a weak point. Now, the sight before him forced a rethink. To attack headlong into those chevaux de frise and antler fences would be suicide. "Pass my order," Khazrelbat said, his voice carrying. "Set camp here for the night. Send 10 scouts in each cardinal direction to reconnoiter. I want detailed reports on their defenses and troop deployments. Find any weak points." "Yes, General," the captains answered. Before the order could be acted on, a sharp, mocking voice rang out from the rear. "General Khazrelbat, have you seen their defenses and lost your courage?" Khazrelbat turned. A middle-aged man in an ornate robe had approached with a small retinue of guards. His complexion was pale, his smile thin with arrogance. This was Ram, the administrative officer Lord Ren Ermin had sent, a sycophant who swaggered on the strength of Ren Ermin's favor and habitually overrode military men in the name of civil authority. He had volunteered to accompany the force to supervise, or, more accurately, to steal the credit for retaking the town. Khazrelbat suppressed his irritation. "Lord Ram, their defenses are extraordinarily tight. Night has fallen. A rash attack will be costly. My plan is to camp, gather intelligence, and strike at dawn once we know their dispositions." "Investigate? Rest?" Ram sneered, hands clasped behind his back as he prowled closer. "Don't forget, you were ordered to retake Huangte town within 3 days. 1 day has already gone by. You delay and now you propose rest? I think you're afraid." "Lord Ram, the battlefield changes quickly. You cannot obey orders blindly without regard for circumstances," Khazrelbat replied, tone growing firm. "They have 3 layers of defense: cheval de frise and antler fences outside the walls, barricades, and inner strongpoints within. Cavalry cannot use its strength in such terrain. Forcing an attack will only lead to senseless losses." "A soldier's duty is to obey orders," Ram snapped, voice rising. "We didn't keep 800 elite cavalry to cower on a hill. Huanga town is a small place, and those greenskins are barbarians. Can't your men take it? I think you're wavering." Khazrelbat's hands tightened into fists, nails biting his palms. He knew Ram knew nothing of battlefield realities. Ram wanted glory and a report he could take to Ren Ermin, and Ren Ermin, suspicious, temperamental, would not look kindly on any implication of cowardice. One complaint from Ram might cost him his position, or worse. "You're going too far," a young cavalryman exploded. "The general is considering the safety of the whole command. What right have you, an official who knows nothing of war, to override him?" "Exactly. Why should we die for your glory?" others shouted, hands drifting toward sword hilts. The men respected Khazrelbat and had long resented Ram's pretentious meddling. "Enough!" Khazrelbat barked, cutting them off before tempers turned to steel. He could not permit his soldiers to attack a guest of the Lord. Ram's influence could see them all punished. Reluctantly, they lowered their hands, eyes blazing hatred at the civilian. Ram's smirk widened. He knew Khazrelbat's constraints. The commander drew a breath and tried one last argument. "Lord Ram, please reconsider," he said quietly. "It's dark. We don't know their dispositions. A blind assault will walk us into traps. Wait till dawn, concentrate our force, and strike their weak points. That way we minimize casualties and take the town cleanly. Prudence is just an excuse for cowardice. Ram said flatly. Order your men to attack now. If you refuse, I'll send word to Lord Ren Ermin that you hesitated in command, that you delayed a military opportunity. Your position will be forfeit. Those words were a knife. Khazrelbat knew what Ren Ermin's wrath could be. He had risen by victories and could not throw his career and his men's lives away on a point of pride. The soldiers behind him were his brothers in arms. He could see their faces and the loyalty in them. But he also knew the consequences of defying the Lord's confidant. He closed his eyes a moment, then opened them with resolve. There was no honor in defiance that would doom them all. He would obey, and if there was a price, it would fall on him. Pass my order, Khazrelbat said, voice flat with a kind of sorrow. All troops assemble. Prepare to attack. Target, Huangta town. The men obeyed, though their reluctance was evident. Hooves rose again as 800 elite cavalry formed into attack ranks and began to move toward the town. In the night, their armor flashed coldly, like a procession to the scaffold. Khazrelbat mounted, scanning the maze of defenses and picturing what might await them. Horses trapped, men slaughtered, desperate fighting with no chance. He tried to shake the image, but the foreboding stayed. Atop the town walls, Glenn peered through a crenelle, watching the approaching line. A cruel grin split his face. He turned and shouted to the greenskins massed behind the parapet. The humans are coming. Get the rolling stones and the firepots ready. Let them taste our welcome. The night answered with savage cheers, the greenskins' roars carrying through the dark like a promise of pain. 158 opened the city and released the people. Night lay over Huangta town like spilled ink. Dozens of torches along the walls burned fiercely, their flicker staining the dark blue stone crimson and casting ugly shadows over the greenskins gathered there. Shito stood at the highest point of the wall, with his hands clasped behind his back. The black iron of his heavy armor caught the torchlight and gleamed coldly. His cape snapped in the night wind. He narrowed his eyes and watched the hesitant cavalry far off, a crooked smile tugging at his lips. Boss, those humans are dragging their feet. Too scared to come over? Glenn said, shouldering his massive axe as he lumbered up beside him. The greenskins along the parapet poked their heads out and gestured at the distant riders with contempt. To them, an enemy who wouldn't charge was the most pathetic kind of prey. Shito tapped the stone with the tips of his fingers and shook his head. They won't dare attack at night. Cavalry is for daylight charges across open plains. In the dark, their sight's gone, and our defenses are layered. They can't see the ground. Rushing in blind would be suicide. Having fought many years, he knew human tactics and habits like his own hand. Khazrelbat, their cavalry commander, was no fool. He knew the risks of a night assault. The hesitation meant the enemy was either weighing options or waiting on orders. We can't just stand here forever, can we? My axe will rust, Glenn complained. No rush. She too clapped Glenn on the shoulder. If they won't come, we don't have to linger. Send the order. Everyone not on watch goes back and rest. Sleep well. We'll have a proper hunt in the morning. Got it, Glenn barked, then roared down the line. Boss's orders. Everyone off duty. Back to your bunks. Tomorrow morning, we'll gut all these human scum. The greenskins cheered and dropped their weapons. Most of them filed down from the wall, laughing, leaving only a handful of orc sentries and goblin archers crouched behind loopholes and battlements, eyes fixed on the cavalry. Shito gave the riders one more glance and, smiling as if savoring the coming meal, turned toward the town hall to rest. Just as he stepped off the wall and reached the gate, a sentry's shout split the night. Boss, bad news. The human cavalry's moving. They're charging for the town. Shito spun back, sprinting for the wall. Under the torchlight, the distant riders had become a black wave surging toward Huangte town. The pounding of hooves shook the ground and cut through the silence. Shouted orders from the cavalry could be heard even at that distance. What are they thinking? Shito laughed, incredulous. Whoever's leading them must have had his brain squeezed out, charging blind in this darkness and on this ground. Glenn went wild, the thought of battle lighting his face. Ha! They must be in a hurry to die. I'll go down and split their leader in half with one swing. Hold, Shito snapped, voice sharpening. Order the goblin archers into position. Readied bows, no firing until I say. Yes, sir. The sentries responded. The archers who'd been heading back to sleep scrambled out of their barracks like spiders, clambered onto the crenellations, knocked arrows, and settled lines of sight on the approaching cavalry. The torchlight picked out the hungry glint in their green eyes. By then, the cavalry had closed to about a mile. Khazrelbat rode at the front, knuckles white on the hilt of his longsword, his face drawn and furious. If Ram hadn't been pressing him hard, urging him, threatening to charge him for disobeying orders, he would never have risked a forced attack in such conditions. "General, there are anti-cavalry ditches and spiked barricades ahead," one of his captains called out. Khazrelbat ground his teeth. "Order the troop to slow and avoid the defensive works. Find a flank or a gap." They were just shifting formation when the gates of Huangte town groaned open. Every rider's jaw dropped. They expected the greenskins to bar the gates, to rain rocks and arrows down on them, not to fling the doors wide. Then a ragged stream of townsfolk poured out, old men, women, children clutching bundles, faces white with terror. Behind them, tall orcs waved axes and yelled in broken common, "Move, move, there's going to be a war. Get back to Blackrock City, don't die here. Hurry, don't dawdle, the orcs will kill you," an orc bellowed at a lagging villager, raising his axe in a gesture that sent the peasant stumbling forward. Driven and terrified, the townspeople shoved toward the cavalry like a flock of panicked sheep. Spotting armored riders, hope flared in their eyes. "Save us, please save us," they cried. Khazrelbat's face went pale. He spat under his breath. Damn it, that green-skinned chieftain's got a vicious mind. He understood then what Shito had done. The townspeople were a human shield, deliberately pushed into the horse's path to break the cavalry's formation. Cavalry must charge as one. Once the formation fragmented, their shock power vanished. The infantry coming up behind would be obstructed by the crowd and lose the chance to encircle the town. But if he ordered his men to slaughter the civilians to keep formation, the political cost would be ruinous. Prince Patton's fief was already restless. Killing innocents would spark outrage, perhaps rebellion. Retaking the town would be the least of his problems. "General, what do we do? They're surging at us," the captain shouted, spear trembling as he indicated the mob. No one wanted to give the order to cut them down. Khazrelbat sat rigid in his saddle, heart hammering, knuckles white on his sword. He was caught in Shito's trap: preserve discipline and be forced into slaughter, or avoid bloodshed and watch his force collapse into chaos. On the wall, Shito watched the confusion below, his smile growing colder. He nudged Glenn. "See, humans always hesitate. These people make excellent shields for us. In a way, we did them a favor. We didn't massacre them. We let them leave." "Clever, boss," Glenn grinned, rubbing his hands. "Those human scumbags won't know what hit them." Shitu's eyes flicked from the panicked crowd to the man leading the cavalry. They'll either stand by as their formation falls apart or take on the crime of slaughtering innocents. Either way, they lose. Night rang with cries, townsfolk wailing, orcs driving them forward, the cavalry's commands, and beneath it all, the low, cruel laughter of the greenskins along the wall. The archers had their bows strung and were waiting only for Shito's signal. Below, Khazrelbat sat trapped. Whichever choice he made, the price would be bloody. The greenskins watched with the enjoyment of an audience waiting for the curtain to fall, ready to unleash a storm of arrows on the cavalry stuck in the dark. 159. Scattered cavalry outside Huangte town. Under the cover of night, chaos spread like a contagion. Khazrelbat, astride his warhorse, watched the crowd of townspeople surging before him. His face was so grim it looked as if water could drip from it. He reined in sharply and barked, "All troops halt, quickly. Make the townspeople disperse." No sooner had the order left his mouth than a harsh voice behind him snapped back. "Khazrelbat, how dare you hesitate? Do not stop. Attack at once." Ram sat a little way back on a scrawny white charger, his expression frenzied with fanaticism. He could not see the chaos ahead. His only thought was to break into Huangte town as fast as possible and claim the glory. The townspeople's lives were nothing to him. "Lord Ram, look, those are civilians ahead. A forced charge will break our formation," Khazrelbat shouted. "Townspeople? Commoners!" Ram waved him off. "Run them down if they get in the way. The Lord wants Huangte town, not these useless lives. Hesitate again and I'll have you court-martialed." Khazrelbat's hand closed white-knuckled on his sword hilt. He knew Ram's eyes were blinded by the promise of honor, and that reasoning with him was useless. If he persisted, he might provoke Ram's wrath. Between risking a complete rout and being accused of insubordination, Khazrelbat chose a desperate middle ground. "Pass my order," he called, voice rough with urgency. "Shout at them to disperse immediately. Anyone who blocks the way will be treated as colluding with the greenskins and killed without mercy. Those who block the way will die. Disperse at once. If you don't want to die, move aside. Don't force us to be rude." 800 cavalrymen answered in a single, thunderous roar that shook the night. The sound carried the authority and menace of soldiers, but most of the townsfolk were simple people who had never seen such a scene. They only knew that greenskins were merciless killers and that the riders before them must be their saviors. They did not grasp the meaning behind "those who block the way." Interpreting the cavalry as their protectors, they surged forward with renewed desperation. "Save us, Lord, save us!" cried an old woman, clutching her grandson as she stumbled toward the nearest rider, eyes wide with pleading. "Get out of the way! Quickly, get out of the way!" the cavalryman shouted, pale as he lashed his reins to steer aside. But the horse spooked, reared, and kicked the old woman hard in the chest. She coughed blood and collapsed beneath the crush, swallowed instantly by the tide of people behind her. "Charge! Keep charging!" Ram yelled from the rear, oblivious to the slaughter at the forefront. The cavalry had no room to pull back. They could only force their way through. Hooves thundered, kicking up dust and fresh, dark blood. Though some riders tried to control their mounts and avoid trampling civilians, the scene rapidly spun out of their hands. Panicked townspeople tripped war horses. Riders were thrown and crushed under the feet of the horde. Others had their reins seized. Immobilized, they became easy targets for the goblin archers on the wall. Some men, to protect themselves, swung their blades and hacked down anyone who barred their path. Armor was spattered with blood. The ground became a maelstrom of screams, neighing, and clattering metal, a tragic, wailing symphony. Outside Huangte town, the field became a living hell. Bodies were flattened in tiered heaps. Blood ran in dark rivers that caught the moonlight. Khazrelbat, still on his horse, stared at the carnage. Regret and fury burned in him. He knew the blame would fall on him, and that the folly behind it had a face. Ram, safe in the rear, issuing orders. "Ram, you idiot! Look at what you've done!" Khazrelbat shouted, wheeling his horse and charging for him. Ram had been watching the progress with a smugness that vanished when he saw Khazrelbat bearing down, murder in his eyes. "Khazrelbat, what are you doing? I'm the Lord's favorite. Touch me and the Lord will punish you." "The Lord," Khazrelbat sneered, eyes cold. "If not for your orders, how would my brothers have been mowed down? If not for you, these innocents wouldn't be dead. You scum, your death is no great loss." He drew his longsword and, taking advantage of the chaos, slashed. The blade cut true across Ram's throat. Blood spurted. Ram's head fell and rolled on the churned earth, his eyes frozen in terror. His body toppled from the horse and was quickly trampled beyond recognition by the panic-stricken crowd and pounding hooves. Khazrelbat roared to be heard over the chaos, his voice clear and loud for all to hear. "Greenskins infiltrated the ranks. Lord Ram has been slain by greenskins." For a stunned heartbeat, the cavalry froze. Then the men turned from the fallen body to the turmoil and understood Khazrelbat's intent. In such disorder, blaming greenskins was the perfect cover. It removed a troublesome officer without the stain of insubordination. "Kill the greenskins! Avenge Lord Ram!" a captain bellowed. And to give the lie weight, he swung his sword and cut down a panicked villager beside him, calling him a planted spy. Other riders joined in. The cry of "Kill the greenskins" rose and for a time drowned out the townspeople's screams. Khazrelbat knew they could not stand and fight long. The force was already frayed. "Pass my order! All troops, retreat! Fall back! Retreat immediately," he commanded, the authority in his voice brooking no argument. "Break left and fall back to Black Rock City." "Yes, General," came the response. The cavalry, suddenly granted collective permission to save themselves, wheeled and pressed through the nearest opening on the left. The charge was gone. They now rode with their armor streaked in blood and dust, faces haggard with fear and exhaustion. On the town wall, Stone watched everything with a satisfied grin. See, he said to Glenn, humans tear themselves apart, entirely foolish. Order the archers, give them a proper farewell gift. All right, Glenn shouted. Archers, fire! Don't let those human scum escape. The goblin archers on the curtain walls were ready. At Glenn's command, they loosed their bows. Whoosh, 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 like a black rain, poisoned arrows fell upon the fleeing riders. Arrow rain, Khazrelbat warned, brandishing his sword to deflect what he could. But in a disordered retreat, there was no effective defense. Arrows found men and mounts alike. Some riders dropped instantly, struck in vital places. Others had their horses hit. The animals threw their riders and were themselves cut down, leaving bodies exposed to the volley. Keep moving, faster, Khazrelbat urged, banging calves with his heels as he went, all the while shielding where he could. They had to get beyond the archers' reach, otherwise the losses would be devastating. Behind them lay mountains of bodies and rivers of gore, and above them the greenskins' triumphant roars from the wall. Stone stood with a cruel smile and called down to the greenskins in the woods beyond the town. Tell the kin in the forest to move, bite at their tails, kill as many as you can. Whack! The greenskins' cries tore through the night. From the trees came a surge, hundreds of orc boys bursting out like a pack of wolves. Their battle axes flashed. They gave chase to the routed cavalry, intent on finishing what the arrows had started. Khazrelbat heard the pursuing roars drawing nearer and felt despair tighten his gut. The retreat would not be peaceful. His army was scattered, exhausted, and under fire. Whether they could make it back to Black Rock City was no longer certain. The night closed in, blood staining the ground and the air heavy with the stench of slaughter. Outside Huangte town, the ruined field told the story plainly. A tragedy born of arrogance and folly, with a price paid in countless lives. 160. Counterattack night hung over the wilderness outside Huangte town like a blood-soaked shroud. Khazrelbat's cavalry fled toward Black Rock City, hooves pounding bodies and puddles of blood into dark red spray that arcs through the air. Behind them, hundreds of orc boys surged like rabid dogs, axes inlaid with warpstone whistling as they swung, their savage cries rattling the night. Wah! Kill these human runts, don't let them escape. The orcs, lurking in the trees, were a terrifying sight. Skins slick with green oil, arms knotted with grotesque scars, charging like wild bulls. They were the Black Rock tribe's bloodthirstiest shock troops, and now that the human cavalry was in full retreat, their eyes burned red with fury. They closed in, teeth bared. A rider at the rear failed to evade an axe blow. Iron armor split like paper, organs and blood pouring out. He fell screaming and was torn apart by the swarming orcs. Another horse was struck and threw its rider. 3 orcs pounced, tusks aimed for the throat, axes hacking at limbs. His screams faded into the wilderness. In the space of half an incense stick, the cavalry had lost nearly 100 men. Bodies littered the ground, blood soaking the earth, a metallic stench rising into the night. Khazrelbat rode at the head of the survivors, listening to the screams of his brothers behind him. Anger burned in his eyes. He ground his teeth. He could not let his elite cavalry be wiped out here. Suddenly, he reined his mount and shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Hold steady. What are you panicking for? To the left, Scree Slope. To the right, Deadwood Forest. Squad 1, turn left with me. Squad 2, turn right. Use the terrain to outflank them. Show the orcs the might of the Barton cavalry. He abandoned a passive retreat and, under cover of night and terrain, launched a desperate counterattack. These men were battle-hardened elites. Earlier disorder had been caused by the townspeople, but the moment their commander barked orders, their fighting spirit flared. Yes, General, they answered in a roar. Squad 1, with me. Khazrelbat spurred his mount. 30 riders followed him down the scree, hooves clacking on loose stone as they carved an arc in the dark. On the right, the captain of Squad 2 led another 30 into the deadwood thicket, war horses crashing through the underbrush and showers of dry leaves. The orcs, mid-kill frenzy, paused when they saw the humans split, simple minds slow to parse tactics. Huh, the human runts split, one orc grunted. Who cares? Kill him, wag! Barked the orc boss, and he led his horde straight into the open ground between the 2 cavalry groups, straight into Khazrelbat's trap. Just as the orcs reached the center, Khazrelbat's roar came thundering down the scree. Kill! 30 riders slammed down the slope like tigers, spears leveled at orc backs as stones flew. From the deadwood forest, Squad 2 burst out, longswords flashing, biting at the orcs' flanks. The pincer closed. Ambush, the orc boss realized too late and bellowed, but his horde was disordered. Chaos spread, orcs were impaled, limbs severed, crushed under hooves. A spear punched through an orc's chest, green blood spattered off the blade as he fell. Another had his arm lopped off by a charging swordsman and howled before a warhorse made a mess of him. Khazrelbat cut through them with cold efficiency, splitting a skull in one stroke, green brains and gore splattering his armor. "Kill them! Avenge our fallen!" he roared. The cavalry surged with renewed ferocity. They speared, slashed, trampled. Orc howls of arrogance turned into desperate screams. The orcs, used only to blind charges, had never met such coordinated tactics. Crippled and surrounded, they scattered like headless flies, their bodies piling across the ground. Green blood ran into the dark rivulets of human blood, making the scene even more gruesome. "Retreat! Fall back!" the orc boss finally bellowed as he watched his warriors die. He tried to pull the survivors toward Huangte town, but the cavalry pressed the hunt, cutting down stragglers. In an instant, the 100-strong orc band was reduced to less than half. As Khazrelbat prepared to press the advantage and finish the pursuers, a new sound sliced the air. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. He looked up to see hundreds of goblin archers pouring from the night, running with bows already knocked, poisoned arrows arching down like black rain. "Arrow rain!" Khazrelbat shouted, swinging his sword to bat aside the incoming volleys. One rider failed to dodge. An arrow struck his shoulder. The poison took hold instantly. He convulsed, fell from his horse, and died within moments. The goblins split into two bands and occupied high ground on either side of the clearing, raining poisoned shafts down without pause. Even glancing hits brought a quick, agonizing death. "Boss, we came to save you," the goblin leader cried, covering the orcs' retreat. The orc boss seized the chance and, cursing, scrambled and rolled away toward Huangte town under the bowman's umbrella. "Human runts, we'll be back, whack!" Khazrelbat watched them go, unwilling to chase. The goblin archers held the terrain. Their arrow storms made pursuit suicidal. Reluctantly, he ground his teeth and ordered, "Break off the pursuit. Retreat. Get out of range, now." The cavalry formed up, blocking arrows as best they could, and fell back toward Black Rock City. The goblin archers did not pursue. They kept shooting until the last riders vanished into the night, then ceased fire and allowed the orcs to limp back to Huangte town. When the clash ended, the wilderness was strewn with bodies, cavalrymen, orc boys, harmless townspeople caught in the slaughter, blood soaking the earth and filling the air with a sickening stench. Night swallowed the carnage, as if trying to hide the sin and bloodshed. Khazrelbat rode with the battered remnant of his force through the dark, casting a cold, hard look back toward Huangte town. The orcs were worse than he'd feared, and this fight had only been the opening. More brutal battles were certain to come. On Huangte town's walls, Stone watched the goblin archers and the remaining orcs return, a small, pleased smile playing on his face. He slapped the orc boss's blood-streaked shoulder and growled, "Don't get impatient. The human cavalry won't get away. This hunt's only getting interesting." The orcs' roars rose again from the walls, bloodthirsty, arrogant, and the sound lingered long in the night.